Parliament.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will now proceed with this meeting. I do want to say that I think it's obvious to everybody that this meeting is on a very important issue. No doubt about that, a very serious issue. And the reason we're having the meeting is that 4 members of the opposition have called the committee back, proper process. And I just want to read the terms, as laid out in the letter from the opposition, so it's clear to everyone, members of the committee and to witnesses, what we're here to discuss today and what we're not here to discuss today. So I'll just read the notification that we got from opposition members asking for this meeting. It reads, We, the undersigned members of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources, request that a meeting of the Standing Committee be convened pursuant to Standing Order 1064 in order to study the prolonged closure of Atomic Energy of Canada Limited's NRU reactor at Chalk River, which has resulted in the decrease of supply of medical isotopes and a worsening health crisis, as well as the future of isotope production in Canada. And it's important to note that we are not the Health Committee, we are the Natural Resources Committee. We're here today to discuss these issues as laid out in this notice from members of the opposition. We are not here to discuss health issues that are more appropriately handled by the Health Committee. So if we could just proceed on that basis. We're missing one witness. We have 2 here by teleconference. And I'm just kind of waiting for the witness to come to the table. There he is. Yes, here he is. Great. Great, yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Ivanko. So I will explain who the witnesses are for this first panel, which goes till 2 o'clock. We have with us in person Michael Ivanko, President, Society of Professional Engineers and Associates. Thank you, Mr. Ivanko, for being here today. Appreciate it very much. We have by teleconference Robert Atcher, President, International Society of Nuclear Medicine, and as well by video conference Sandy McEwen, Special Advisor on Medical Isotopes to the Minister of Health. So welcome to all of you. First of all, Mr. Ivanko, do you have an opening statement?
That's okay. Can you hear me?
You just proceed now, and then we will proceed in the order that Mr. Atcher next and Mr. McEwen after him. So if you could proceed with your opening statements, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll have to read from this. I can't see when I have my glasses off. It's closer. My name is Michael Ivanko. I have a PhD in physical chemistry. I'm the Vice President, actually, of the Society of Professional Engineers and Associates. With me today is Peter White, who's President of SPIA. He happens to be an expert in safety analysis, and he is an engineer. SPIA represents over 900 scientists and engineers who work for Atomic Energy of Canada at Sheridan Park. Our members design the nuclear reactors used in Canada and around the world for nuclear power stations, for research and production of medical isotopes. Our members also provide technical support, safety analysis, and a wide range of services for the nuclear industry. We also work closely with the technicians and technologists who provide fabrication, inspection, and testing in a variety of aspects in the nuclear industry. I'm honored to be invited here to speak to you about nuclear science, and I'm very proud to represent the scientists and engineers who work at ACL, whose qualifications are too many to list. A great number of our members have advanced degrees in a wide variety of specialties, and they've been internationally recognized as experts in their respective fields. I worked in the nuclear industry for 24 years, first 12 at Chalk River, at the Chalk River Laboratories, and at Sheridan Park at the Commercial Division in Mississauga for the last 12 years. My areas of expertise include laser isotope separation, analytical measurement, product development ranging from heavy water upgraders to reactor served maintenance systems. The majority of our members do not directly support operation of the NRU reactor in Chalk River, but many of them were involved in the life extension beyond 2000 and also in the design and construction of the Maple reactors that were meant to replace it. Technical questions regarding the design, repairs, operability of these reactors are probably best left to management representatives who are appearing later. They can draw from the expertise of individual members, both our members and also those who work at Chalk River that we do not represent. I think Canada has every reason to be proud of the people who have helped make Canada an internationally recognized leader in the production of medical isotopes, nuclear technology, and also the safe, peaceful use of nuclear reactors for the production of electricity. Canada is one of only 5 nations in the world that can deliver a reactor project anywhere, and it's something we should be proud of. Much of this success is owed to the supports provided by successive federal governments that have demonstrated their confidence in ACL by providing necessary investments to enable the development of research and designs that could in turn be sold to domestic and international customers. This level of support and tangible and intangible benefits it's generated has been the subject of many debates at the House of Commons and the subject of countless news articles and commentaries. I hope to avoid repetition of those debates here today, but I won't shrink away from declaring the position of our over 900 members, the related 30,000 jobs in Canada's industry, and the hundreds of thousands of family members, friends, and the Canadian public who support them. Canadians should be proud of our role in providing medical isotopes, nuclear services, and reactors for peaceful purposes. We've profited from this research and innovation. Canada should continue to support ACL to ensure domestic supply of medical isotopes for Canada and the world, we believe, and we should continue to support ACL to successfully complete the design and generate sales of our newest product, the ACR 1000. We must look at this as an investment by Canadians in an industry that has paid many dividends. The research that is conducted by ACL benefits Canadians and has established us as a world leader. There are few industries where all aspects are conducted in our own borders. This is the only industry I can think of in Canada where we dig the uranium out of the ground, we refine it, we turn it into fuel, we put it in reactors that we design, build, and make almost all the parts for, and then provide services for. There's no other industry like it, and few people appreciate that. There's been much said about the sale and privatization of ACL. For the record, our members believe that a sale is likely detrimental to the national interest. We believe that nuclear technology should not be under the control of corporate interests, but held by Canadians through their government. I'd like to point out that one of our main competitors, Ariva's main shareholder, is the French government, and it's a fact that escapes many critics of ACL. Ariva has been successful in producing and selling its reactors, but it has also had its shares of delays and problems with multi-billion-dollar cost overruns in Europe. I only raise this because Canadians have been led to believe that delays and cost overruns are somehow unique to ACL. They're not. As I pointed out earlier, the nuclear industry is not a production line company, or should have pointed out. In our industry, we can't afford a product recall. Canadian technology is considered amongst the best in the world, and we have an exemplary safety record in this respect. As this committee is focused on the isotope issue, I'd just like to urge you to consider the broader picture and what Canada's role should be in the nuclear industry. The isotope issue is extremely important, but it's just one aspect of a nuclear industry, and we also need to have a discussion on the future of this industry, because that is indeed the question before you. If there's not a thriving industry, there is no isotope issue. We simply would have no isotopes, or we'd be buying them from somebody else.
Thank you for your opening statement. We now go to Mr. Atcher, Robert Atcher, President, International Society of Nuclear Medicine, again by video conference. And go ahead, please, Mr. Atcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make one correction. I'm the immediate past president of the Society of Nuclear Medicine, and Michael Graham from the University of Iowa is our current president. But I have been tasked, starting with Dr. McEwen's presidency, with leading a task group that was responsible for addressing the problems that we've been having with supply of these critical medical isotopes. And so my background is I have a PhD in nuclear chemistry. I'm a radiopharmaceutical chemist. I work at Los Alamos National Lab, and I have a joint appointment in the College of Pharmacy at the University of New Mexico. I want to address specifically some of the issues associated with the outage at the NRU at Chalk River. approximately 50% of the material that we use in the U.S. is produced by that reactor. And that presents a huge problem for us whenever that reactor is not functioning. In addition, that reactor also has more excess capacity than the other 4 reactors that are currently producing 95% of the world market of molybdenum-99. So whenever any of those other reactors go offline, the NRU has the capacity to make up for a substantial percentage of the market that that reactor supplies. And so there's a double whammy whenever the NRU goes down. It's not only its normal production, but it's also the excess capacity that that reactor produces when the other major reactors in the world are offline. 80% of the imaging procedures that we do in nuclear medicine in the United States use technetium-99m, the daughter product of molybdenum-99. They include cardiac studies, cancer studies, which in our case are about 80% of the imaging procedures, and then we do a number of other procedures involved in gastrointestinal problems, genitourinary problems, other issues associated with neurologic problems, infection, etc. So we have patients across the board who are imaged using nuclear medicine procedures, in particular nuclear medicine procedures that utilize this critical radioisotope that we get from the reactor at Chalk River. One of the problems with not having technetium-99m available is that we use other imaging procedures that present one of 4 complications as far as that patient's concerned. One is that the radiation dose that they receive from the procedure is higher. Another is that the accuracy of the procedure isn't as good as the one that we would get from the technetium-based imaging procedure. We see an increase in cost as a result of the technetium-99m not being available. And finally, in many cases, we use a much more invasive procedure, which presents a danger to the patient of increased morbidity and potentially mortality. In the U.S., we have, in particular, a problem because we use a technetium-based radiopharmaceutical to do bone scans on cancer patients who have lung cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer, with a very high likelihood that that cancer may spread to the bone. We have asked our Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services to cover sodium fluoride PET imaging for bone scans, but to date we have not received permission to charge for those procedures. So those patients with those critical cancers, we currently don't have any alternatives in terms of imaging procedures for that population. In addition, for patients with breast cancer, we use a technetium-based test to find the lymph node that's closest to that tumor so that the surgeon can excise that lymph node, send it to pathology, and determine whether there's been spread beyond the primary tumor in that patient. If we detect that there is such a spread of that cancer, those patients go on to chemotherapy and other procedures to try to keep that cancer under control. So it's a very important part of the staging procedure for patients who are undergoing surgery for a tumor. In addition, for cardiac patients who are obese, those patients we get much better imaging procedures from using technetium-99m with those patients than we do with an alternative radioisotope, thallium-201. And then finally, the pediatricians have expressed concern about the fact that in the U.S. we have a program called Image Gently, where we are trying to reduce the radiation dose that the pediatric population gets from imaging procedures. Those patients who are not availed a technetium-based radiopharmaceutical for their imaging procedures often have to have procedures that involve a much greater dose and much less accuracy as far as their staging goes. And so another critical population is impacted by having this material not available. So that, in summary, gives you a clear idea, at least as far as the U.S. Practice of nuclear medicine, as far as the problems that we have when we have a reactor such as NRU go offline for what appears to be an extended period of time, and the problems associated with the alternatives that we are looking at to using the technetium-based imaging procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atcher. We go now to Sandy McEwen, Special Advisor on Medical Isotopes to the Minister of Health, again by video conference. So, Mr. McEwen, if you have an opening statement, if you could go ahead with that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief. As you have identified, I'm the Special Advisor to the Minister of Health. My day job is as Chair of the Department of Oncology at the University of Alberta. I'm also a previous Chair of the Department of Radiology at the same university, and I'm a nuclear medicine physician with an active therapeutic practice at the Cross Cancer Institute in Edmonton. I'm Dr. Atcher's predecessor as President of the Society of Nuclear Medicine, and I'm also a past President of both the Canadian Association and the Canadian Society of Nuclear Medicine. As Dr. Atcher has correctly identified, there is an impact on our patients caused by the shutdown of Chalk River. The community has had in place since the initial shutdown at the end of 2007 a working group which has included members of the nuclear medicine community, the oncology community, the cardiology community, as well as members of Health Canada, looking at ways of ameliorating the crisis. We have attempted to provide guidelines for our clinical colleagues on how best to utilize available resources, and the guidelines that we have published and continue to modify, I think, have helped to ameliorate the impact of this on our patients. In particular, we have recognized the importance of providing as accurate a guideline as we can of supply of molybdenum. One of the key issues at the beginning of the shortage was the unreliability of this supply prediction. Over the last 4 to 6 weeks, we've been able to provide, I think, a more consistently reliable guide to our clinical colleagues of the supply of molybdenum and of the generators, and also a more consistent expectation of what will be happening in the following week. This has helped to improve planning, it's helped to improve patient flow, and it's helped to improve the way in which our clinical colleagues have managed their department and changed processes. What we now need to find out, I think, is now that we've survived the shutdown of Petton over the month of August with perhaps less disruption than we feared, is we have to look to the medium term. AECL have indicated that they expect to be up and running in the first quarter of 2010. And our hope, obviously, is that they are up and running before the planned 6-month shutdown of Petton at the beginning of the end of February. We think it important that we now start, again, understanding what the implications of the AECL startup are going to be. We really now need to understand what regional disparities are occurring in the country. Some parts of the country have experienced very little disruption. Some parts of the country have experienced significant disruption. And one of my key tasks now is to understand what those regional disparities are, what are causing them, and what we can do to help. I think it's important to recognize the degree to which the community has made very significant changes to work practices to deal with the shortages, and very significant involvement of all members of the community in ensuring that we can actually continue to supply our patients. We are hoping that we will be able to continue the accurate indication of future supply, and we look forward to confirmation of when AECL will be able to reopen NRU. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity of speaking.
Thank you very much. We'll go directly to questioning now so that we can have as many questions as possible, starting with the official opposition, Mr. Regan, for up to 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. McEwen, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Dr. McEwen, first of all, I understand that you're no longer a member of the Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine. Who do you represent?
I'm a member of the Canadian Society of Nuclear Medicine, which is the overarching body representing nuclear medicine in this country.
And would you say you represent that organization or the doctors?
I think that I was appointed as special advisor to the minister because of the significant national and international expertise that I have, my expertise in the field of nuclear medicine, the fact that I have breadth of knowledge through nuclear medicine and through oncology.
Point of order, Mr. Anders? Okay, I guess it's been dealt with. Go ahead, Mr. Regan.
Dr. McEwen, do you agree, or perhaps you're aware, I presume, with the motion unanimously passed by the Canadian Medical Association this week as it relates to medical isotopes, and do you agree with it?
5 of them.
It has 5 different points.
Which of the 5 motions?
Well, are there some you disagree with and
Which
some
of
you
the
agree
5
with?
motions?
Are there some you disagree with and some you agree with?
No,
I guess the question is...
As a clinician, Shall I start?
Yes, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. If I can go through the motions in order, Mr. Chair, it might be helpful. I believe that the first motion, as a clinician, I am obviously supportive of this motion. The second motion, I believe that we have attempted to have very broad representation in our consultation with the nuclear medicine physicians. The Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine was actively involved in my appointment and in the conversations around my appointment, and Dr. Urbain was on the panel that agreed to my appointment. I think that the investment is important, and I think that we have clearly started seeing that. The CIHR and the NRCAM panel, I think, are important elements of that item. I think that the motion that was proposed by the president of the CMA, recognizing and appreciating the responses of the clinical community, is appropriate, and I enthusiastically endorse that one. And I think that the final motion, which is looking at new technologies and, most importantly, new ways of producing technetium-99m, which may not necessarily be reactor-based, I think is a very important motion, and clearly this is now before the NRCAM panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. McEwen, I don't know if you addressed the motion about the Maple nuclear reactors. The Canadian Medical Association urged the government to have a panel to thoroughly review the decision to cancel the Maples project.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that that is part of the mandate of the NRCAN expert panel. I have some knowledge of nuclear physics. I am not a nuclear physicist, and I certainly am not competent to discuss any specifics around that. I'm hoping that the NRCAN expert panel will provide sound advice on that.
Thank you. Dr. McEwen, you're, of course, aware that on November 18, 2007, the Chalk River, the National Research Universal Reactor was shut down. The shutdown was for approximately a month. At that time, you described the shutdown as, quote, a catastrophe for patients, unquote. And of course, the NRU has been shut down now since May the 14th, so over 3 months, and we're hearing it's going to go on until sometime in the winter or spring, it sounds like, at least. How would you describe the situation today?
I think the situation for our patients is of great concern. I think that we have learned a great deal from the 2007 shutdown. The working group that we have had going pretty much consistently since that initial shutdown has come up with sound advice, has come up with creative advice for our clinical colleagues on how to deal with the shortages. I think that without the role of that working group, we would not have seen hospitals able to cope as well as they have. As I indicated in my opening statement, I am very concerned that there do appear to be significant regional disparities in how hospitals are able to cope. I think that if you look at the data that I have got, hospitals in the West are dealing with it perhaps a little better than some of the smaller urban centres in Ontario and Quebec. That is of concern to me. It's been the basis of a number of conversations I've had with Dr. O'Brien, who is the president of the OANM, and I'll be continuing to try and understand where those disparities come from and what we can do to ameliorate them.
Dr. McEwen, through you, Mr. Chairman.
A minute and a
Dr.
half,
McEwen, last
Mr.
question,
Rubin,
perhaps, unless we have time for more. Given the fact that that AECL's board of directors had already made a recommendation to shelve the Maple project to the minister prior to the 2007 shutdown of Chalk River, is it your view that the government should have begun coming up with a plan B to deal with production of medical isotopes at that time? I mean, we had, of course, a month-long shutdown, and one would think it suggested that there's a possibility it could happen again.
Mr. McEwen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I was not aware that the AECL board had made that recommendation that early. I think that there is clearly hope that the AECL reactor will come, the NRU will come up in the first quarter of this year. I think that the proposals that I am aware of that have gone to the NRCan expert panel look creative. Many of them provide made-in-Canada solutions, and I think that I'm looking forward with a great deal of enthusiasm to the report of that panel. And Mr. Chairman, as you know, I will be appearing before that panel on September the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. Regan. Your time is up. We go now to the Bloc Québécois, Madame Brunel, and if there is time left, Mr. Mello.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we're here today because of this situation of a shortage, this emergency situation. The government's reaction has led to a deterioration in the health of patients. And specialists in nuclear medicine have said that the situation is catastrophic. And according to Dr. François Lamoureux, who is the president of the Quebec Association of Nuclear Physicians, has said it's terrible. Now, you're aware of the federal support for the nuclear industry, and it seems to me that this support, whether it be the support of the former government or the present government, has diminished, has dwindled. Canada has been a leader in this area, but when the Prime Minister says that he wants to do away with isotope production, I wonder how you think we can go on maintaining our position as a leader in this area. We've talked to various specialists in this area, and witnesses who have appeared before this committee have talked about relaunching the industry and restarting the reactors. Some are for this idea and some are against. What do you think of restarting the Maple reactors? Is this possible? And could they provide isotopes? Could they produce isotopes, and could that be a future solution?
There were a number of questions there. One of them was, is it feasible to restart the Maple reactors? I don't specifically work on Maple technology. All I can tell you is that I know credible technical experts on Maple technology within my company that I work for who have come out very strongly, and one recently vocally in the press, I think it was in the Globe and Mail, making the argument as to why they couldn't be restarted in a time frame reasonable to deal with the isotope crisis. And I know that those people who are saying these things are not saying them because they have to say them, but because they genuinely believe this way. So I have to defer to their judgment. I don't believe that they're lying when they say these things. I believe they're telling the truth. You asked another question, I think, about whether support for the industry was sufficient. Did I understand that correctly?
C'est le soutien du gouvernement.
I'm talking about the federal government's support. Are you proud of the federal government's support? Because it seems to me that the government is lacking in vision and seems to be wanting to disengage from isotope production, at least in terms of the nuclear industry. The
government of the day has been supportive of certainly my employer, in the sense that they have given them, considerable funds over the last year and a half to complete the ACR 1000 design. We appreciate this. The issue of isotope production, I think, when you look at it from an industry perspective, I try to mention that it's just one thing. Most people don't appreciate that NRU was built as a reactor not to make isotopes, but to carry out physics experiments, to test fuel, do these kinds of things, and the nuclear medicine business was developed over a period of time. The bigger issue, I think, for us in the industry is that we would like to see an NRU replacement down the road, not just for isotope production, but because the viable industry needs to have a research reactor. And I don't believe the support is there for that. I think starting the isotope production reactors, if it's possible to start the Maples, that will solve that particular issue, but it won't solve the bigger issue, which is to have a viable industry. Personally, no one likes to say this. So much money is not enough. I think there has been money there for certain projects, and it's appreciated. But an investment in a research reactor is a 40-year investment in the future. It's an investment in physics research. It's an investment in isotopes. It could be an investment in many things. It could cost $1 billion or $1.5 billion, but I mean, we gave the auto companies $10 billion we may never see again. This would be $1 billion or $1.5 billion that would keep on giving.
Madame Brunel, you have just a little over a minute left, or 2 minutes, pardon me, 2 minutes.
Monsieur Malo, je vais laisser mon temps, Monsieur Malo.
I'm going to allow Mr. Malo to put a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I listened to Dr. McEwen earlier, and I believe that in answering my Liberal colleague's questions, I believe he's no longer a member of the Association of Nuclear Medicine, of Nuclear Physicians. There seems to be a dichotomy between what we're hearing from doctors who are on the ground, who are practicing in these very particular shortage conditions, and they seem to have much more realistic forecasts. Now, Mr. McEwen has a much more positive vision, and I wonder on what grounds do you base your almost jovial optimism? And when he says that the Minister of Health and the Minister of Natural Resources last August, said that they would be, were going to have an expert panel. And what have their proposals been? Well, we haven't heard yet. We haven't heard anything about this. And they won't be submitting a report until the end of November. And whereas the situation is very urgent, it's a very fragile situation for doctors and especially for patients who have to live with all the problems caused by the isotope crisis.
Mr. Chairman, if I can respond to that, I find it offensive that he would regard my comments as jovial. They are not jovial, and I recognize the importance of this to my patients. I practice, I see patients every day. I am actually in the middle of a clinic. I have come out of this clinic to come and talk to this panel. So I find your comments unfortunate. The degree to which there are regional differences across this country are very, very real. When we talk to the provinces and territories at our meetings, we have an indication from them of the degree to which there are both delays in tests and also the degree to which there are cancellations of tests. The provinces and territories from their health ministries are reporting that there are manageable delays. This is clearly not entirely acceptable for our patients, but they're manageable. What is clear to me as I talk to my colleagues on the ground is that there are these big regional disparities across the country, and that the sites that appear to have the biggest difficulty in coping are those small urban sites that are dependent either upon small radiopharmacies or upon a generator being supplied to an individual hospital radiopharmacy. Clearly, that is a very great concern to me and to the physicians who are dealing with those patients. What I now have committed to do with my colleagues is actually understand what is causing those regional disparities. So, Mr. Chair, I believe that I do understand the seriousness of it. I am a practicing physician on the ground. As I said, I am actually in the middle of a clinic as we speak. I do understand the regional disparities, and I am attempting to address them, and I am not underestimating the impact on patients.
Mr. McEwen and Merci, Madame Brunel and Mr. Milo. We go now to Mr. Cullen for up to 7 minutes. I do understand, Mr. McEwen, that you have to leave very close to 3 o'clock, and if you must do that, just leave when you feel that you have to. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, just
yes.
a point of clarity. Madam Brunel.
Mr. Jean, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Brunel asked a question of Mr. Ivanko in relation to the Maple reactor, and Mr. Ivanko responded that he agreed with the experts in recent articles, and I was wondering if that was an article from Jean-Pierre Labrie from the National Post from July 28, 2009, if that was what he specifically was referring to. He referred to an article. I'm just wondering what article it was.
That is, if I could get clarification, Mr. Ivanko, is that the article you were referring to?
It's the only public explanation or articulation that I've seen, yes.
Thank you. Point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Cullen.
Sure.
That was
before I get started, I'm not sure that was a point of order or anything.
But you get 7 minutes, Mr.
Jean
Cullen. Go ahead.
Mr. Jean couldn't have asked in his questioning. Thank you all for being with us here today, and particularly Dr. McEwen taking time out from a clinic. I'll get right to it. Dr. Atcher, you spoke of the effects on patients. You mentioned 3 specific things that this isotope shortage is having an effect on patients seeking cancer treatment and diagnosis of heart conditions. You talked about the accuracy of the tests being less than perfect. You talked about an increase of radiation causing health effects on the patients as well. And you talked about the procedure itself being riskier. Did I understand you correct?
That's correct.
Now, I'd like to turn over to Mr. McEwen just in case we lose you in the next little bit. You talked about having to leave quite soon. You talked about, I want to take you from your comments in May of this year to your comments just recently. You talked about this being a catastrophe for patients, but since May till now, when the isotope shortages has increased, not gotten better, you talked about offering creative advice. You talked about the ability to triage the emergency and the crisis in isotope care much better. I'm wondering what basis for enthusiasm you have, and considering how long this crisis will continue with the shutdown at Chalk River, where you find enthusiasm for cancer and heart patients in Canada in the future months.
Mr. McEwen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I agree with you. The length of the shutdown and the length of the supply issue is of concern. I think that there have been a number of short-term ways in which we have improved the utilization of the available supply, and we have been able to, I think, keep patient volumes up better than we had originally envisaged that we might be able to do that. Clearly, this is not sustainable over the long term. It is going to create problems for hospital staff as they are working different processes and different patterns.
So perhaps that is the direction.
I do believe that I do believe that some opportunities, the approval of the molybdenum from the Australian reactor may provide us with some medium-term relief in molybdenum supply. In terms of iodine-131, and we have to remember that reactors also make iodine-131, which is essential in the treatment of patients with thyroid cancer, which is my own area of expertise.
So if you could, good doctor, let me step in at this point. This is where When we get to the offering Canadians confidence that these tests will be there for them in the future, we hear terms like may and perhaps, and there might be supplies available, and to families dealing and individuals dealing with the tragedy of having to go through cancer diagnosis and heart diagnosis, mays and perhaps and probabilities don't help very much. To this point, our hospitals have been able to triage, if you will, the situation and make do over a short period of time. We now hear from the government that this shutdown will last many months longer than first predicted. You talked earlier about becoming more reliable and consistent in your estimations, but it seems to the public that you've just pushed back the opening of a possible reactor further and further. While that's being reliable and consistent, it's hardly being helpful or hopeful. It seems to me, and this is the point I want to get to you with here, that there's the suggestion of that Australia can pick up the tab and fill in, and hospitals can continue to scrape together some sort of solutions, when we heard from Dr. Atcher that the accuracy of tests are much less, the radiation doses are much higher, and the procedures are much riskier. How long can Canadians expect to have no plan available from this government other than a report that you might issue towards the end of the year, some many months from now? I'm still trying to find where the confidence is for this as someone practicing the medicine
Mr.
yourself.
Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Chairman,
McEwen.
Mr. Chairman, I will remind the member of the committee that I am not a member of the government. I'm an advisor to the minister. My requirement is to provide advice on dealing with the crisis, and I believe that I am doing that to the best of my ability. When I look across the country, certainly in Alberta, we are coping very well indeed. When I talk to my colleagues in small urban Ontario, they're having more difficulties. If the NIU is going to be down, then we have to find alternatives. The alternatives that we have found, iodine-131 from South Africa is approved and is now in routine use, and we have not seen any significant disruption in the treatment of patients with thyroid cancer.
Then, Doctor, I'm wondering if...
Mr. Cullen, if you'd please give the doctor a chance to answer the question.
I thought he had paused.
He wasn't finished.
And stopped.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. By video conference, it's a little
I understand there's a delay.
There's a delay.
I heard a pause and thought that was over, so I'm commencing with the rest of my questions? Or?
But I do want the doctor to have a chance to finish. Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. McEwen.
So I think that we have to look at the best options we can for our patients. We are looking through CIHR at alternative radiopharmaceuticals. We are looking, certainly, we have approved fluoride for bone scanning, and in my own hospital we have now moved 50% of our bone scans to fluoride so we can free up technetium for other tests. Thallium is a very effective test for cardiac imaging. It was the standard of care for many years, and it is now, people are rediscovering that it is actually a pretty good test, but we clearly have to look at other alternatives. So I see this as, go on.
I just worry because some of the alternatives that are being suggested, we know, don't fit the entire population. That some of the tests you said there's reliable alternatives don't actually assist in diagnosing the same ailments in children in other places. My last question for you, Doctor, is there, we asked previous folks dealing with this issue, is there anybody that understands where the shortage levels are in the country right now? Is there anybody that's collecting the data to understand where patients are waiting longer, where certain tests are or not available, and what the total supply level of isotopes in Canada is? Does anybody, does anyone you're working with have that information for Canadians?
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Mr. McEwen, go ahead. Doctor.
Mr. Chairman, there is a weekly bulletin put out on supply levels for the following week. That is now proving to be remarkably accurate and to help hospitals plan. The use of alternative tests frees up technetium for those patients in whom the alternative tests are not appropriate. So, for example, fluoride bone scanning, I would not do fluoride bone scanning routinely in children. It's a very effective test in patients with cancer. And so for every patient that I do with fluoride, I free technetium for somebody else who can't have fluoride. We are currently getting from the provincial and territorial ministries fairly accurate listings of what the test delays are in each province. So I think the answer to the question, Mr. Chairman, is we are providing that information. I am provided that information, and I believe the provinces and territories also have it.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Your time is up. We go now to the government side, to Mr. Allen for up to 7 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate if Dr. McEwen can just stay for a couple more minutes. I appreciate the fact when he said that now that Petton's back up, that we'd fared a little bit better than we expected, and the accuracy of the supply data is getting better. But I want to pick up on one of Mr. Malo's points here on the regional disparities, and we referred to that before. And Doctor, you were talking about looking at an assessment of those regional disparities. Can you elaborate a little bit on what your game plan is for that assessment and when you might have that done? Because presumably, with the NRU going out into the first quarter, we're going to continue to have these regional issues. And how do we get our handle around those?
Mr. Chairman, my game plan is, I guess, a three-step plan. The first is to really increase my conversation with AMSMNQ and with the OANM, because those are the two areas where these regional imbalances are occurring. Secondly, it's to work with the provinces and territories to try and really get a handle on what their understanding of the disparities are. And third, it's to continue to expand my conversations with individual sites to understand how individual sites are faring. I have had a small number of conversations and intend to continue doing that.
Just on that, do you have a timeline as to when you're looking to finish that assessment?
I'm hoping to get as much of it as I can done. The minister will be meeting with the provincial and territorial ministers of health in September, and I think it would be very helpful if I could have at least a somewhat clearer understanding in advance of that meeting.
Okay, thank you. The national picture on the PET scanning, and you've talked a little bit about alternatives, and of course PET scanning, we've heard in some of our previous testimony that is an option as well. Have provinces that have used that cope better during this shortage, and how have they coped better?
Mr. Chairman, those data aren't in yet.
Okay. The next question is, based on the alternatives that you're using, what percentage would you say at this point in time of these treatments are using other technologies? And do you believe that some of these can continue into the future, or as soon as the NRU is back and we have the supply of isotopes, that we'll be going right back into the moly and technetium?
That actually is a very complex question. I think there's no doubt that we have learned from this supply shortage that the business model that we have used in nuclear medicine is perhaps imperfect. I think that if we try and look at the tests that can be utilized as alternates, there are some PET tests. Thallium is an effective test for cardiac imaging in perhaps 50 or 60% of patients. There is a PET cardiac test that we need to look at going into the future. Clearly, there has been some shift to non-nuclear medicine-based testing as well. So I think that as this goes forward, there will be a complete reevaluation of the way in which we offer nuclear medicine services.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Dr. Atcher, just in picking up on some of your comments earlier, how would the entry of the U.S. into the medical isotope industry, and how do you figure it's going to change the situation we have now? Can you elaborate a little bit on that discussion?
Dr. Atcher, go ahead.
Thank you. One of the things that we have been discussing since the outages at NRU and now Petton briefly over the last month and potentially 4 to 6 months in in 2010 has been how can we address the rather substantial problems associated with these outages. We recently did a survey of our membership and determined that 80% of them say that they're currently have had an impact based on the outage at NRU and at PET. And many of them have no alternative sources. 53% said that they had no alternative source of the molybdenum-99 based generators. So one of the things that we have been trying to work with, and I just came from a meeting of an intergovernmental group here in the U.S., who are proposing to look at some alternatives to help in the short term with the shortages. One option being to use reactors based in the United States to irradiate targets, which would then be shipped to Chalk River for processing. One thing to keep in mind is the fact that we have plenty of reactors in the U.S. and around the world that are capable of irradiating these targets, but we have a limited number of sites that are capable of processing those targets and removing the molybdenum and producing a quality of molybdenum that's qualified for use in humans. In particular, those sites have to be approved by the FDA in the U.S. and the TGA in Canada in order to have that material used in human imaging. And so it's the processing facilities that turn out to be the bottleneck. Of course, when a reactor of the size of NRU is offline, it creates a serious problem for us, as I mentioned, not only for the supplies that we routinely get from it, but also for the excess capacity that we can take advantage of when one of the other reactors is offline.
Mr. Allen, you have another minute.
Okay, just one real quick question then. Following up on that, Dr. Atcher, is there any, by putting the targets in these reactors, you have the reactors, is there any licensing issues that would mean that that might not necessarily be a short-term solution because you are introducing something else into the reactor core that's different?
In some cases, we would have to get permission from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to engage in that activity, but we have been briefing the commissioners of the NRC crisis that we have at the moment and some of the potential solutions. So they've been engaged in the conversation as we've been exploring some of these alternatives. But there are, as you point out, regulatory issues in terms of irradiating those targets and then moving those targets to Canada for processing.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, and thank you, Dr. Ivanko, Dr. Atcher, and Dr. McEwen for your very helpful information. We will now suspend just for a couple of minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, as we change witnesses. We will reconvene the meeting with our second panel for this afternoon. And we have here in this next hour Hugh McDermott, President and CEO of AECL, and Bill Pilkington, Senior Vice President and Chief Nuclear Officer, AECL. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here today. We have to stop meeting like this or people are going to start talking. You've certainly been here a lot in the past year and a half, and I do appreciate you doing that to give us the information that's so important. So if you have an opening statement, either of you, just go ahead, please, for up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais vous présenter...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce Mr. Bill Pilkington, who is the Chief Nuclear Officer for AECL.
Here, disappear. If you like to, you can resume that out in the foyer or somewhere like that. But let's give our full attention to the witnesses and to the committee proceedings. Sorry for interrupting, Mr. McDermott. Go ahead, please.
Quite all right, Mr. Chairman. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais vous présenter...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce Mr. Bill Pilkington, the Chief Nuclear Officer for AECL.
Impact of the ongoing strain on the supply of medical isotopes across Canada and around the world. We are obviously following the news of the shortage very closely, and we have daily reminders of the urgency and the importance of our mission. We deeply regret the all too real consequences of the shutdown of our Chalk River facility. Nowhere is the deep sense of duty to remedy this situation felt as acutely as it is among the men and women of AECL, and most especially among the talented and dedicated employees at the Chalk River facility who have been working around the clock since the outage occurred in May. As our work has progressed, we have conducted ourselves with the greatest possible transparency. We provide proactive disclosure of our progress on a weekly basis. I have directed that there be clear milestones and reporting of progress against those milestones. This is a project where there continues to be full communication with all of our stakeholders. We, in fact, published our 17th status report on August 19th. In that update, we provided guidance on the duration of the shutdown. This guidance continues to be founded on the best evidence available, including the most up-to-date analysis of the inspection data, progress on repair strategies, and critical path requirements for restart after an extended shutdown. At this time, the selection of the band of weld buildup technique allows us to project that the NRU will return to service during the first quarter of 2010. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission's approval will be required prior to AECL refueling the reactor. As a result, AECL and the CNSC signed the protocol for the NRU restart licensing activities on August 14th. The protocol outlines the administrative framework, milestones, and service standards for the licensing activities required for restarting the NRU reactor. It is posted at nrucanada.ca. This protocol ensures, in that same spirit of transparency, that the full regulatory review process is followed, and when the NRU returns to service, it will operate safely while once again producing isotopes. To recap our return to service plan, we have developed a three-phase program. The first was to do a condition assessment of the reactor and to select a repair technique. We have completed this phase, but will continue with confirmatory inspection and analysis. Testing of the repair process and special tools will be carried out in the full-height mock-up now constructed in the former NRX facility at Chalk River Laboratories. The mock-up is now being used to test the specialized tools designed to perform vessel cleaning and the removal of material samples for analysis. The second phase, of course, will be affecting the repair itself. We are using proven technology. A key challenge is accessing the repair sites through a 12-centimeter aperture that is a distance of 9 meters away, all performed in a radioactive environment. This requires considerable expertise in designing specialized tooling and conducting training within a full-scale mock-up environment. Finally, the third phase will be returning the reactor to service, as I mentioned, with the full oversight of the CNSC. These three phases interlock and overlap to some degree. This approach ensures that we will get this reactor back into service as soon as we possibly can. I want to state unequivocally our belief that the NRU can be repaired and is indeed well worth repairing. It is very clear in our minds that the repair program is the best available option for continued supply of medical isotopes to patients. We already anticipate looking to renew the current operating license of the NRU for a further 5 years to 2016. To sum up, since the reactor shutdown, we have always sought to communicate what we know. We have based our project plans and our communications surrounding these project plans on evidence, not speculation. We will continue to be fully transparent with Canadians based on what we know today, and we are confident that we can return this reactor to service in the first quarter of 2010. We truly have an outstanding team of professionals, scientists, engineers, technologists, who can get this job done. We know the eyes of the country and the world are upon us, and that is why we have the personnel, the supply partners, and the third-party independent verification that is appropriate to these circumstances. I do want to conclude with a brief comment on some of the ongoing debate about the Maple reactors and the possibility that they could be a solution for the near-term production of medical isotopes. Let me reiterate the facts. The Maples were never approved to be put into service. The reactors are in an extended shutdown state. The Maples are not a viable solution for long-term isotope production, and they most certainly are not a solution to the current isotope shortage. Thank you. We're happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDermott. And we go now to the questions. First, to the official opposition, Mr. Baines, for up to 7 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to thank the witnesses for coming out this afternoon. And I think your comments early on indicate the seriousness of this issue, and it's greatly appreciated that you're here this afternoon. And I just want to start off by asking you a set of questions. First of all, prior to the shutdown in 2007, how many times had the shutdown at Chalk River triggered a global isotope crisis?
That's a question I'm not sure I can answer. Mr. Pilkington.
Actually, I'm not sure I can answer it either. Certainly not in the time that I can recall. Before the NRX reactor was taken out of service, I believe in the early 1990s, there was a second reactor at Chalk River that could back up the NRU. And I think since that time, I'm not aware of any isotope shortage of the magnitude in the end of 2007 or the current.
Yeah. So the multiple isotope crises that we've seen have happened under the Conservative watch. Is that factually correct?
That's a comment I'll let you make. I'd prefer to let you make it.
I just wanted to... Fine.
Very wise.
On June 5th, 2008, you appeared before this committee alongside the former Natural Resources Minister. And at the time, the Minister Lund stated, and I quote, "The NRU reactor is operating more efficiently and safer today than in any time in history. Canadians can be assured that they will have an adequate supply of isotopes." At that time, did you provide those reassurances to the Minister for him to make that assertion, which was on, again, June 5th, 2008?
Well, we're stretching my powers of recall, but certainly I could imagine that we would have given the Minister assurances that it was our very sincere intention to operate the NRU to the best of our abilities and to ensure that it was a reliable production environment for isotopes.
Okay, because the quote speaks for itself, and it clearly indicates a fair amount of confidence in the ongoing supply of the isotope. That's why I bring this quote to your attention. In the last 20 months, we've seen 3 unplanned extended shutdowns at the NRU Chalk River, each time triggering a crisis, as I've talked about before. The latest shutdown began 3 months ago and is scheduled to continue into the next year, as you indicated in your remarks. And on August the 12th, just a few days ago, the Ministers of Natural Resource and the Minister of Health issued a release stating that they were very disappointed with AECL's announcement on that day, and that they have actually instructed you to provide a return-to-service plan. Can you elaborate what that plan is? Is it different from what you've articulated in your opening remarks? And have you provided any additional information that you can share with us?
It is not in any way different from what I just laid out for you. AECL's governance structure is one that works through Science, Technology, and Nuclear Oversight Committee of our Board of Directors, and then our Board of Directors, and then the Board is in turn accountable to the Minister. And we did just recently present our repair and return to service plan to our Science, Technology, and Nuclear Oversight Committee, and we gained their authorization to proceed with the repair plan, and it very much reflects the timetable that I just gave you.
Okay. So that plan is actually just a timeline that you articulated. Is that correct?
Perhaps I'll let Mr. Pilkington respond, because he has direct responsibility for the day-to-day conduct of the project.
Thank you.
So we are, in fact, working to a plan and to a schedule, and we are continually updating that schedule as we get new information. So the point that we're at is that we have enough inspection data that we have been able to make a decision on going forward with repair technology, and as a result, that adds, I guess, definition to the plan that we will be executing. So at this point, we do have a much better schedule laid out as to when we can bring the NRU back into service.
You refer to a schedule, and you refer to as 2010, the first quarter. Is there any specific date you can provide beyond that quarterly date in the year to give a better indication of that plan and the timeline?
So we have a schedule that we've put together, and it does have still some uncertainty around it, and that is why we have given the general range of the first quarter of 2010.
The reason I ask that is because yesterday the Minister, Minister Raitt, stated that the government was continuing to press AECL for a quicker return to service, as she had quoted in the papers. Given that the extent of these repairs are necessary at this point, how feasible is it? And is the implication that you don't understand the urgency, that you might not have the resources or tools, or that she actually has some sort of alternative suggestion that she provided to you to actually make that type of assertion? Because you've indicated from your opening remarks the urgency and the sensitivity of this issue. You've indicated that you have a plan, but yet she's continued to press you for a quicker return. Does she have an alternative solution that she's provided or given you direction on?
There is no alternative solution. I think my interpretation of the Minister's remarks is that she reflects the wishes and hopes of all Canadians and all people involved, that we will be able to return this reactor to service as soon as is humanly possible. She has certainly given us very clear direction that nothing is to stand in the way, no other priority is to take precedence over the return to service into isotope production. And also that we are to be deploying our resources to the extent possible on a 7/24 basis, and that's been happening. The range that you're seeing from us now is a very real reflection, as Bill said, of the range of uncertainty that surrounds a project of this complexity and this nature at this particular stage in time. So we've based our guidance on on evidence we have. We have a firm timetable that we're managing to, but we have to reflect in some way, shape, or form. It's our job to be realistic and practical as to where things stand, and a precise deadline today would not be meaningful. We have a target, and we have some contingency built into it, and we feel comfortable, as the CEO and as the Chief Nuclear Officer, committing to a time frame of the first 3 months of next year.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. We go now to Madame Brunel for up to 7 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Bonjour, messieurs. Merci de votre...
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for appearing here on this lovely end of summer day, but you'll understand that the urgency of the situation has led parliamentarians to gain some enlightenment on this subject. You've just said, and he is a special counselor, Dr. McEwen earlier, said that if the NRU, he said that it will remain closed. Now, he's not a specialist in the field of nuclear reactors, but given the complexity of the various stages, And given your repair plan, you've given different dates. How can you be sure today that the reactor really will be ready for service in spring 2010?
We base our guidance that we make public on the accumulation of the evidence available to us and the expertise that we can bring to bear, both internally at AECL and externally. And the guidance that we have provided successively over the past few months of this project has always reflected that very real uncertainty that exists at an early stage of a very technically demanding and complex project. The most recent release we made does in fact reflect a very different tone to our projection, because we didn't just say it's going to be at least this amount of time or at least this date. We put a bracket on it, and we said it's going to be within that 3-month period of the first quarter of next year. And that really reflects the business judgment that both Bill and I bring to the task, and also the support and advice of both internal and external experts who have been retained. So there is always uncertainty. There is always risk. But today we feel comfortable making the commitment publicly that AECL is planning to return this reactor to service in the first quarter.
I've had the opportunity to take a look at your internet site, and you have a mock-up where we can see where there is a corrosion, and we see the various areas where there is corrosion. Does this mean that the situation is getting worse every time you look a little closer, or have you really looked at all the problems having to do with this reactor, and that now you've begun the second and third phases, which would be repair and then bringing back online of the reactor?
So what's happened is, as we've progressed our inspection, we have covered more of the circumference of the vessel. And so initially we were dealing with one leak, and as we increased our ability to do inspection, we found other locations where there was corrosion, and so we have now come to the point where we believe as many as 9 areas on the vessel will require repair. They're all relatively small, and they're very similar. And they're also located at a similar height above the base of the vessel. So there is a band around a portion of the base of the vessel where we find this corrosion present. We have now completed the inspection of the full circumference through this band at that elevation. And so we feel much more confident that we have the necessary information both to specify the repair technology that we need to apply and to move forward and manufacture the tooling and, in fact, implement that repair. I would just add that with 9 sites, it became apparent that there was little additional schedule time required in order to actually put a band of weld buildup around the base of the vessel instead of simply repairing individual sites. And so by applying a band of weld repair as the basis for our schedule, we essentially bound that schedule, in that if we were to identify some additional sites within this general region, then that would not further extend the schedule to repair the NRU.
À combien estimez-vous les coûts de...
What do you cost this repair? How would you cost this repair of the vessel? Because we know that there are labor costs, assessment costs. You need to bring in expert opinions. Who will be paying the bill?
Seek funding authorization from the Government of Canada for us to fully carry out this project. And that's, we expect that the government will impose on us a very serious requirement for us to justify the costs demonstrate the confidence that we have that the repairs will be carried out successfully.
Peut-être une dernière question dans votre...
One last question. In your presentation, you said that you hoped that we could go further in certification and be licensed up to 2016. Am I correct? Is that rather optimistic, don't you think? Or is it something that is really possible, given how old the reactor is?
An initiative that we have had underway since the decision was made to terminate the Maples project, which is now over a year ago. And at that time, it was clear that in order to fulfill our commitment to produce isotopes for the global marketplace, that it would require that we renew the operating license of the NRU and indeed Chalk River facility for the production of isotopes. It was on that basis that we developed an isotope supply reliability program that is basically the sequenced phase of activities, set of activities that we will undertake in order to, we hope, successfully secure a license renewal from the CNSC. And we have a protocol signed with the CNSC for the conduct of that project. So we're certainly very intent on achieving that license renewal, and we're working very closely with the regulator to ensure that we take all the necessary steps to ensure that it will happen.
Merci, Madame Brunel. We go now to Mr. Cullen for up to 7 minutes. Go ahead.
And welcome back again. Hope we don't keep meeting in these circumstances. The first question, I understand you folks are obviously heavily involved in the medical isotope business. The government, through the Prime Minister, decided some months ago that Canada was getting out of the medical isotope business, made a sort of a public declaration of policy. I was asking the representative from the workers, from the folks that were in the association of people who work in the industry that you also work in, if they'd ever been consulted. Did anyone ever ask you?
The guidance I get is clear from the Government of Canada, and as it stands right now, that is for me to continue to produce isotopes from the NRU reactor until I'm instructed otherwise.
Isn't that a bit strange, though, when you see the, I don't know if he's your boss, but the Prime Minister gets up one day and says, we're out of the business, we're not doing these isotope things anymore, but wants you folks to keep working as hard as you can to keep the duct tape on this really old reactor that we're reminded of its age all the time. It seems a very contradictory message. Does that affect the way that you folks go about the repairs? You just put your heads down and do what you're told?
My minister's been very clear as to what her direction is, and that has been for us to return this reactor to service as quickly as we can, and that's what we'll do.
Let me ask you about that. The minister you talked about earlier was quite definitive with you, and she has been with me as well about that Maple was a no-go. There was no chance. Her government was not interested in pursuing the Maple projects. That's been her clear and definitive direction to you as well?
We recommended to the government, and the government accepted that recommendation. And so in that respect, the decision to terminate the Maples project was one that very much flowed from AECL, based on our view that project was not a wise pathway for us to follow going forward.
So it's a little strange then, because I was just reading the paper today, coming in from Halifax, and the expert panel's looking at the Maple as an option now. This expert panel that the government has convened itself has put Maple back on the table, I assume under the government's direction. I'm getting a bit confused.
I wouldn't assume that it's under the government's direction. I believe that I don't know, but I believe that the expert panel has been willing to entertain submissions from many different parties, and certainly any one of them are free to put ideas forward. And we at AECL are very, very prepared to review, have our decision scrutinized, have it reviewed, because we want nothing other than the right answer and the best answer for the global medical supply chain for isotopes.
At the beginning of your testimony, you talked about understanding the effect and the concern within the public of what it means to not have these tests available, these tests for cancer and for heart conditions. I'm sensing you get it not just intellectually about timelines, and you get it emotionally. You understand how worried people are.
you can imagine that there's nobody at AECL who feels comfortable seeing the coverage of this issue in the media. And we all feel very keenly the pressures that exist and the intensity with which we have to tackle our challenge.
Along with that, the international obligations that we have, we've created this relationship and confidence with these other buyers, other countries that seek our product, whose confidence, I would assume you would agree with me, has been shaken over these last number of months. I'm not sure any of the folks that we have traditionally supplied to are feeling all that thrilled with our performance.
Well, I would suggest that one of the indirect benefits out of the supply disruptions, not just our reactor, but the Petton reactor and others, but one of the side benefits of those disruptions is the increased awareness globally of the fragility and the dependency of the supply chain on a small number of reactors. And so we certainly can understand that there would naturally be a movement to bring on a more diverse set of supply sources and reduce the dependency that we all have worldwide on the Petton and the NRU reactor. And by the way, I think it is important to note that we certainly did our fair share last year.
Sure.
As a supplier to that world market by upping our production.
Did that ever strain the reactor, putting that much isotope production out?
No. The first thing that we did in responding to the outage of the Petton reactor was to look at how we could modify our production without impacting the reliability of the NRU.
You understand my line of questioning, that we suddenly had to replace another down reactor. We upped our supply within months of having done that. Our reactor goes down with holes in it. The public could be forgiven. I want to get to the question of your comfort with the timeline as proposed. You're saying first quarter of 2010, 9 months from now, give or take, 8, 9 months. When this first went down, and the reactor first went down in May of this year, you also issued some timelines and some estimates of when the reactor would come back up, and you were comfortable with those as well.
We estimated, we provided guidance on the minimum outage.
Right.
And that was, again, that truly was our best. We knew it would not be shorter than X. And
what was that, if you can remind me?
In the bill should perhaps respond to that, but I'd like one more shot at it. But you go ahead.
No, I would just point out that I believe our first estimate was more than 3 months, and that was based on the belief that we would be doing a simple mechanical repair of one site on the reactor vessel. After we did some inspection, we came back and we said late in the year, earliest late in the year, and that was based on having done inspection and predicting that we would likely have to repair as many as 5 sites.
Right.
We now are expecting to have to repair as many as 9 sites, and we have bounded the total number of sites by moving to this band of weld buildup as the repair method.
Just before your comment,
Mr. Cullen, Ms. McDermott had indicated he wanted to finish his answer to the question.
I think this will be relevant to his answer, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
We're operating under the minister's request to return to service. This is a ministerial request. Is it a formal thing? Is it an informal thing? Is it a mandate? Yeah.
I consider it a very formal. I consider it a formal direction.
Right. When was it issued?
Well, it would have been within days of the occurrence of the outage, because it was very clear that as it became evident that the outage would not be a short one, it was very clear to all concerned that this would be a matter that would attract a lot of attention and was serious. So certainly from the very earliest stages of this, the direction has been clear from our minister.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Your time is up. We go now to the government side, to Ms. Gallant for up to 7 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the witness. First of all, I must say how refreshing it is to hear the newfound support of the nuclear industry from the New Democratic Party. We've heard that even though there may be many reactors or other sources of Moly-99, the bottleneck may really be the limited number of places where the radioactive targets can be received and processed to make the medical products. There must also be a challenge to find locations for the handling of the resulting radioactive waste. Can you tell us the role of Chalk River Laboratories presently and in the foreseeable future to provide these essential services as part of the supply chain for medical isotopes?
Yes. The Chalk River site is licensed to process our own waste and also to accept waste from other producers. And so we have essentially the rest of the supply chain. We have processing facilities which are currently available, and we have a waste management stream that is currently available. What we lack right now is the supply of the radioactive targets.
Okay. Now, isotopes seem to be very critical and important to the entire world. And they also, according to testimony, seem to be financially lucrative. Why aren't there many other reactors or producers throughout the world?
Opinions can differ on this matter, but it's not clear to me that that market prices for isotopes have in fact been at a level that would be fully compensatory for AECL. So there are many factors that go into the determination of international market prices, and we do not have control over the pricing of our product in that marketplace. So I would take some issue with the notion that isotopes are a highly profitable business for us. We receive a revenue share. We incur significant costs, and at this point in time, this is a business line where our cash out has substantially exceeded our cash in.
Okay, so given what you just said, do you see a shift to alternate isotope sources in the future?
I'm not all that well equipped necessarily to be a predictor of that, but certainly if there is an evolution to a market price that will attract investment and attract development of alternative methodologies of production, then you could expect naturally that will occur. Otherwise, it will need to be through the commitment of public funds, whether it's here in Canada or in other jurisdictions.
There seems to be quite a concern about the length of time that it is taking to repair. Now, I understand the name of the item that has to be repaired is the calandria. Is that the...
Okay, the calandria would be the term used on a commercial CANDU power reactor, so we would refer to it simply as the reactor vessel.
Okay, so has this been replaced in the past?
Yes, this is the second reactor vessel. The original one was replaced between 1972 and 1974.
And what is the usual lifespan of this item?
Okay, the vessel does not have a prescribed life. It's really based on the results of the aging management of the vessel. The first vessel was of a somewhat different material, aluminum material alloy than the current one, and had a significantly shorter life. The current vessel has been inspected several times and deemed to be continuing to be fit for service for an extended period into the future.
So it was not due at some point for a replacement. It's just been patched since 1974 or 72.
Actually, there have been, I think there was only one repair made in about 1991, 1992. But other than that, it's been really only inspection.
Okay, can you tell us how this item is going to be repaired? We've heard about welds, we've heard about patches and paints. Explain to us why it's taking so long.
Okay, it's all about location. And so the drawings that you were handed out which are really images taken from 3D CADS models. If you look at the first one, it's a model of the complete reactor. And what's important to note is the holes at the top on the deck of the reactor, which in fact are the access points. These are the 12-millimeter diameter access points, and then anything going into the reactor must go through the tubes that go down to the vessel. And then you have the cutaway, which shows the base of the vessel and shows the actual location of the leak. And so the challenge here is that all of the inspection and repair tooling has to be operated and inserted through these small holes in the top, and has to carry out automatic operations at the base of the vessel. And on the next slide, which I think is on the back of yours, is more detail of that area. And so there is an area in the order of 4 centimeters in a band around the vessel where we see the corrosion. And so that is the location. And then finally, the third picture depicts the 2 repair techniques that we're pursuing. And so on the left, you have the weld repair technology, and recognize that all of that equipment has to come through this 12 centimeter opening. And then we have to be able to actually do the weld at the base of the vessel, have cameras monitoring that, and then inspection equipment to inspect it. Then on the other image is a mechanical repair technology, which would appear relatively simplistic, but again, the tooling to implement that from the distance that we're carrying out all of the operations. So it's the location that we need to do the repair in a high radiation environment, remote and accessed only through a very small opening, that makes this a very large technical challenge.
Okay,
Gallant. Thank you, Ms. Gallant. Your time is up. We only have a few minutes left with these witnesses. If we could have 2 minutes to each party, and just one question pretty much, so 2 minutes to include the question and the answer. Go ahead for the official opposition, Mr. Baines.
Yes, I just wanted a clarification on this, and this is what I wanted to ask last time as well, is that you have the Prime Minister, and I know this was mentioned before, I just want further clarification on this. You have the Prime Minister on one hand saying that we're no longer going to be in the isotope business. You have the Minister saying that they want to seriously entertain the Maple reactor option, and then you've clearly indicated your position here. Which one should Canadians believe? Because in a serious matter like this, people are trying to figure out a solution, and they're getting mixed signals at a political level and from AECL. So how do people reconcile this? How does one go about saying what makes sense now? And that's where I think a lot of the confusion lies.
It's certainly not my job to comment on government policy. I execute the directions I'm given. And so the direction I have at this point in time is that we are to bring the isotope production capacity back online as quickly as we can, and we are to proceed with relicensing or renewing the operating license for the NRU facility from 2011 to 2016.
I appreciate that, but when I asked you a question early on about the comment that Minister Lund made about the future viability of isotope supplies, he made that based on the recommendation that you had given. And you've made a very clear recommendation on the Maple reactor and the Maple as a viable option, yet the government tends to have a different viewpoint on it.
The Maple is a viable option?
No, you've indicated the Maples are not a viable option.
Correct.
But the Minister said that she wants the expert panel to look at it. So
well, I think
clear, sharp, or an opposite viewpoint of what you presented?
I don't view it as opposing. I view it as I can imagine that in her position of responsibility, she wants to ensure that no stone is left unturned, and that an independent expert panel will have the opportunity to review and examine any and all options and any and all decisions that have been taken. So I'm quite comfortable that that process will be one that will end up with the right decision, whatever that might be.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. We go now to the government side, to Mr. Anderson for up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, there's been a push by some people who really don't understand the situation around the maples to suggest that they should just be started up and get them up and running and get going. And I'm just wondering if you can go over again, I think it's important, why that's not feasible, why that's not an option, and why you determined that that wasn't a reasonable option last year.
Very happy to do that. Firstly, when the decision was made just over a year ago, that was based upon third-party advice and our own internal expertise applied against a very challenging problem, which was trying to resolve a technical and licensing issue that, up to that point in time, had defied resolution. When we looked forward at the pathway and said, what do we need to spend? How long is it going to take? What kind of risks do we have to assume in order to go further and try and bring the maples to a position where they are licensable? We took the decision that it was not the right way for us to go. It wasn't an appropriate expenditure of taxpayer money, and it was indeed chasing a possibility that had a relatively low probability of success. And that decision and that judgment still holds in our view. As a result of that, we did take the steps to bring the reactor into an extended shutdown state, and that's where it resides today. It is, in our view, years away, even if we decided tomorrow morning to restore the Maples reactors to some state whereby they could potentially produce isotopes for medical purposes. It is years away, hundreds of millions of dollars away, and entails very, very high technical risk. We don't believe that those are appropriate pathways for us to follow, and there is no scenario we can imagine whereby the Maples could be brought out of their current state and be any solution to the near-term isotope shortage.
Mr. Anderson, your time is up. We go now to the Bloc Québécois, Madame Brunel, for up to 2 minutes.
There's something that's bothering me. In May 2009, when the reactor shut down, it wasn't the first time. And you say that you want to extend the life of this reactor till 2016. Now, the last time it shut down, was the government in a position to forecast it? And do you think that between now and 2016 there might be another shutdown and another crisis? And I'll be here 10 years from now with white hair asking the same questions.
Crisis. I may not be here responding to it, your questions, but we believe. Sorry for that offhand remark. We believe very, very much that the right decision has been taken and the right direction has been taken to have the NRU as the isotope production environment for Canada and Canadians. And that is based on all of the evidence that we have, and we have, between the two of us, have a lot of confidence that this reactor can serve out its useful life as a reliable production environment for isotopes.
Il me semble que vous avez une vision à
It seems to me that you have a rather short-term view of things. Shouldn't you have an action plan for the medium and long term? We know that the useful life of what the useful life of the reactor is. So 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people might have been thinking about this. So why don't you take advantage of this opportunity to not only repair it, but also to look at other possibilities, other options? I don't understand this obstinacy in capitalizing on this reactor.
I believe that the minister's decision to appoint an expert panel is a very wise one, because it will bring to the fore all of the possibilities that can and should be examined, and that will hopefully lead to a future direction with respect to isotope production, both in Canada and both in nuclear and non-nuclear ways. So in many respects, I view our role has to be to follow the policy direction of the government as it exists, and that my interpretation of events is that there is a need for further evaluation and further study of what possibilities exist, and that at the appropriate time, decisions will be made as to how The Government of Canada should give us direction, and what ACL should do with respect to continued production. In the meantime, we know what our job is.
Merci, Madame Brunel. And now, finally, back to Mr. Anderson for up to 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Follow that up a little bit on the Maples issue again, and that is that you've had folks come in from around the world, right? I mean, from Brookhaven, from the Idaho National Laboratory, and I think the Argentinian company as well, to try to solve this problem, and they were not able to do that. So I'm just wondering, an expert panel that's being appointed, what do you perceive that they could bring to the table that that these folks haven't already brought? And the second question that I have is, when did the problems become evident in the Maples reactor? My understanding is it was in 2001 and 2. People were well aware then that there were significant problems at that point. Is that true?
The emergence of the licensing issues with the Maple did indeed occur early in this decade, 2001, 2002, in that area. With respect to the expert panel, my view is that it's an eminent group of individuals. They will undoubtedly want to ask good questions and undertake whatever kind of reviews they feel are appropriate to come to a determination. So I think that's a healthy process that will bring to the surface many, many possibilities. We expect that the decisions we've taken and the actions we've taken will be subject to some scrutiny as part of that process, and we're prepared to deal with that because we believe that we've made decisions that will stand up to that test.
All right. Thank you both very much, gentlemen, for coming once again and giving us this information. Very helpful to us indeed. So, Mr. McDermott and Mr. Pilkington, thank you. We will change witnesses now, so I'll suspend the meeting for, let's make it as little time as possible, 2 or 3 minutes, and have the other witnesses approach the table right away. We'll resume our meeting now with the next panel. Two witnesses. First, Serge Dupont, Deputy Minister, Intergovernmental Affairs at the Privy Council Office and Special Advisor to the Minister of Natural Resources on Nuclear Energy Policy. Welcome. And as well, Tom Wallace, Director General, Electricity Resources Branch, Natural Resources Canada. Thank you very much, Mr. Wallace, for being here. Have either of you gentlemen got opening statements?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Si vous me permettez, la dernière...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was here earlier. I'm not going to, and I spoke too long. I'm not going to do the same thing. We have provided for the committee my notes, my speaking notes, and I'll only mention a few of the things I had to say. Now, given everything you've heard and given what we've all been hearing for the past weeks and months, we all acknowledge the impact of the shutdown of the NRU reactor on our healthcare system in Canada. It's a very serious problem, and the government cares deeply about Canadians' health and safety. AECL has been trying to put the reactor back into service in the most reliable and safe way. This was mentioned by the CEO of AECL. And the minister said that the bringing back online of the reactor was an absolute priority for AECL, and that the minister was trying to make sure that the industry would do everything it needed to do to make this a reality. Now, we are trying to improve the supply chain in the short, mid, and long term.
The fragility and complexity of the global supply chain and spoke of Canada's role in mobilizing major producing and consumer countries toward enhanced security of supply. On January 28-29, 2009, at Canada's instigation, an international workshop was convened in Paris under the auspices of the Nuclear Energy Agency. 85 participants from 16 countries participated, including representatives from governments, industry, regulators, and the medical community. A consensus was reached then on the need to improve the coordination of reactor schedules, increase transparency, improve the efficiency of the distribution system, and provide timely notification of available supplies to the medical community. This on the basis that the security of isotope supply is a global problem requiring a global solution. Following this workshop, the steering committee of the NEA agreed in April 2009 to establish a high-level group to carry the international agenda forward. It includes representatives of all of the countries which own the aging reactors, the 5 aging reactors producing the bulk of the world's medical isotopes: Canada, Netherlands, Belgium, France, and South Africa. Also includes Japan, the United States, and Australia, which is an emerging producer. Canada chairs the high-level group. Australia is vice chair. I note that all of these steps were undertaken before the unplanned NRU outage. Our message was simple. Collectively, we rely on aging reactors and a fragile supply chain. There is a collective responsibility to bring forward additional sources of supply and to manage available supplies responsibly, particularly in periods of shortage. From our perspective, these efforts and these relationships have paid off. Less than 2 days after ACL announced a prolonged unplanned outage in May, we convened our global partners by conference call, and the minister addressed the group to encourage a supply response. Contacts have been maintained since then through conference calls and a first face-to-face meeting of the high-level group in Toronto on June 17 and 18. Nos partenaires internationaux ont répondu, comme le Canada qui avait...
Our international partners have responded in much the same way that Canada responded with increased supplies from the NRU when the Petten reactor of the Netherlands underwent an extended outage from August 2008 to February 2009. Since May, the Petten reactor stepped up production by 50% and the South African reactor by 20%. Processing capacity was expanded in Belgium to accommodate larger volumes of irradiation by European reactors. Australia intensified efforts to bring its Opal reactor on stream. And while it had its challenges, and when it went off service, the Belgian reactor was in service and helped to reduce global shortages. The Petten reactor has now been brought successfully back into service, and we expect this will help considerably as we head into the fall. That said, the situation will remain fragile and potentially volatile, and continued vigilance and discipline will be required by our medical community to ensure best use of available supplies.
Short term, we're engaged in discussions with the United States government, the Oak Ridge and Idaho National Laboratories, and the Universities of McMaster and Missouri on the possibilities of putting in place backup arrangements to augment supplies when the NRU has to be down for periodic maintenance, as would be the case under a program of life extension. 3 technical meetings co-chaired by NRCan and the U.S. Department of Energy have been held since June to develop options for replacing part of the NRU supply beginning as early as September 2010. Significant work is needed to complete the requisite analysis and safety cases. We've been impressed to date by the level of commitment shown by the U.S. administration in these efforts, facilitated by positive exchanges initiated by our minister. I would add that jurisdictions around the world are reviewing options and supply scenarios. The U.S., by far the largest global consumer, itself is determined to develop domestic supply capacity, and Europeans and Asians likewise are assessing new and alternative sources of supply. This is a welcome development because a reliable, resilient global supply chain cannot be overly dependent on any one source, whether Canadian or other. The U.S. and other global partners recognize that the supply of isotopes, and as we discussed last time, a radioactive product that cannot be stored and must be distributed in real time, must be more diversified and more distributed geographically. Now, Canada, too, must review its options and how our needs in the medical system may be met over the medium to long term. To this end, the Minister of Natural Resources has appointed the expert panel that you already have heard about. I would simply mention the name of the individuals who are serving on this panel, 4 eminently qualified individuals: Peter Goodhand, Richard Drouin, Dr. Tom Mason, and Dr. Eric Turcotte, who have agreed to prepare a report for the Minister by November 30. As you have heard, 22 expressions of interest have been received and are being reviewed by the panel. These proposals deserve careful consideration. The decisions to be taken in regard to future supply will shape our marketplace and how we serve our needs for the next 20 years or more. There are a range of factors to consider, including determining carefully the role of the public sector in achieving the necessary security of supply for Canadians and commercial interests in bringing forward supply capacity. The panel is being supported by a secretariat staffed with officials from Natural Resource Canada and Health Canada. While some of the proponents have chosen to publicize their proposals, I would note that others have explicitly asked that the submissions remain commercially confidential with the panel. The panel and secretariat have respected these requests. Monsieur le Président, nous faisons tous les efforts possibles pour réduire.
Mr. Chairman, we are making every effort to minimize the impact of the current disruption in the global supply of medical isotopes on Canadians. We have done what we can. We've collaborated and worked with our international partners and reactor operators. We've worked domestically and internationally to find alternatives to the supply of isotopes. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions the committee may have.
We'll go now directly to questions, starting with the official opposition to Ms. Bennett for up to 7 minutes. Oh, Mr. Tonks, sorry. For up to 7 minutes, Mr. Tonks.
Thank you. I'm sure I'll share part of that time with my colleague, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to the witnesses. I guess the first question that I have, and I'm sure the committee would be interested in the response, is from purely a philosophical and a professional perspective. Whose responsibility do you believe it is to produce pharmamedical isotopes for the needs of Canadians?
It's a fair question. I think that what we have at the current time is a dependence of the overall global market, including Canadians, on 5 aging reactors. I described last time I was here that there's in fact also some reliance in that process on what we call technetium generators in the United States. I think it is one of the first questions that the panel, in fact, has also sort of focused on in the first discussion I had with them when I went to brief them on the matter. What is the proper role of the government here versus what may be the proper commercial interests? The proper role of the government is to see to it that the needs of Canadians are met. And there may be different ways, different technologies, different commercial arrangements where that may occur. It is early in the process to establish exactly what that may be. But that, I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, is the role of the government, and that's the role of the panel now to advise on how to achieve that goal.
Okay, then I take it from that it would be a responsible position for the department to take in advising the expert panel that the health of Canadians, both medical and economic, is a very high priority, and that there is a total absence of bias with respect to the panel review in coming forward with its recommendations. Would that be correct?
I think we have the terms of reference for the panel have been structured as follows, which is the principal focus is to meet the needs of Canadians in regard to medical imaging and therefore the supply of technetium to Canada. Asking them as well to look at different criteria in that regard, one of those criteria is being other benefits to Canadians that include the economic benefits that may flow from different ventures.
Okay, but expert advice has been given today that there have been shortcomings with respect to the other technologies when there is an interface with a medical prognosis. And so that there is no single solution, but there is a strategic combination of solutions, one of which is the role that NRU has played in terms of producing medical isotopes, and the goal of which was the MAPLE reactors to produce medical isotopes that were of a generic and universal application. And my concern is, and I'm wondering if it would be your concern, that if you listen to Mr. McDermott, who was here just previously, there is no absence of bias with respect to Atomic Energy Canada. They have completely taken off the table, for example, the possibility of reactivating the MAPLE reactors. Now, if there's that kind of disposition, what kind of credibility can the Canadian people have in the strategy that you've also indicated about the fast tracking of the McMaster capabilities and its reactor? I think the UBC similarly has a capability. So, I mean, what trust can Canadians have that the expert panel's decisions will be listened to if it should come out and say, here are the strategic parts, and this is in the Canadian interest, medical, economic, for these recommendations to be accepted?
Well, first, I would just make very clear that the committee will be the panel will be reporting to the minister, not to AECL. So I think the minister is certainly looking to get their best advice, and I don't think the minister is starting from any presupposition about what may be a best alternative. That said, I mean, the government has had to in 2008 make a very hard decision based on the evidence presented to it at the time about the Maples, and faced a situation where there were considerable further costs to be incurred, considerable uncertainty and timelines that made it no longer attractive to pursue that option. If the panel comes back and suggests that the basis of evidence presented to it that this is worth another look, then I'm sure that the minister will be looking at that. As regard the other technologies, just to make one point, I should two points of clarification. The minister has not explicitly asked the panel to advise on Maples. The minister has asked the panel to look at the proposals submitted to it, and we expect, and there is obviously some proposal related to the Maples, and there's therefore an expectation that the panel will take that under advisement. Secondly, you mentioned other technologies, and what we've heard from the medical authority we heard earlier. I just want to make a distinction. I was talking about different technologies to produce technetium. That could be done through accelerators, cyclotrons, or another research reactor. So not the alternatives to technetium for medical purposes.
I appreciate that clarification. I'm sure the committee does. My final question, Mr. Chairman, is, and I'm sure the committee would like to have a comfort level in view of the very professional overview you've given with respect to the role of the panel, the adjudication with backup support from departmental staff, ministry staff. Why would the committee support, or why would we support, contracting the evaluation out in the manner that has been entrenched in the proposal call? Why would we support that?
You refer to the RFP that was issued for advice to be provided. Yeah.
Yes.
We have the benefit of having 4 eminently qualified individuals. I think it is fair for them to have the benefit of some review, some scanning of these proposals, some analysis being performed, so that they're not simply presented with a stack of 22 proposals and say, here, we know you'll work really hard and we're looking forward to your advice. So this is allowing an entity to come in with professional expertise, and we actually had set that out even in the terms of reference when we first announced the panel, that there would be this kind of support to the panel, so they're able to look at the different 22 proposals, consistently across a set of criteria, with some input provided by an outside party.
Thank you, Mr. Tonks. Now to the Bloc Québécois, Madame Brunel, for up to 7 minutes.
Bonjour, messieurs. Merci d'être là.
Good day, gentlemen, and thank you for appearing. Mr. Dupont, you're talking about nuclear medicine physicians. You've been thanking them and commending their work. And these people are working on the front line, and they're seeing these longer and longer waiting lines for care, and they see the patients who need help. But allow me to be a little skeptical, because the Association of Nuclear Medicine Physicians said today that they're concerned by the successive delays in repairing the reactor, and they find this crisis is having devastating effects on the health of Canadians. So what has your department really done since you last appeared here to deal with this crisis? Please reassure us. Give us some comfort. Well, first of all, I'd like to say there is no real dichotomy between what these doctors are saying and the position of the Government of Canada. The Government of Canada is very concerned, and at all levels. And of course, we're frustrated to see that there is no solution we can implement overnight. It's a simple fact. This is something that's happened over a number of years. It happens to reactors of a certain age. And I think, and we heard this in information on the repair of reactors. This is something that's very complex and which will, in the long term, cost a lot of money. So what we're doing now, and you've asked me what we're doing, well, what we're doing is we're looking at what can be done, looking at what capacities we have and what we can obtain internationally. And internationally, we've been able to obtain additional capacity in the Netherlands, South Africa. Now, we can't replace completely the Chalk River production. We won't ever be able to. It'll take us months or years before we'll be able to replace Chalk River's production completely. It's a frustration you're dealing with, doctors are dealing with, and the government is dealing with. It's a simple fact of life. There's nothing we can do immediately. Well, what concerns me the most is that things are so nebulous. Here again, you're talking about this expert panel, which is responsible for looking for solutions. There are solutions on the table, but can you tell us if there are any possible avenues towards a solution? Has the government been neglectful? Has it been sitting on this panel? Has it been doing nothing? We, as parliamentarians, we have to answer to our constituents. And people have come to my office in tears because they can't get care. They can't get the care they need to treat their cancer. It's not true that there are alternatives. I would like to be able to give them answers, and I'd like to be confident that the minister will be able to do something for these patients. Mr. Chairman, I understand completely that the Canadian public has a right to answers. Everything is being done to bring in a solution as fast as possible. But in the meantime, the first solution is to bring these reactors back into service as soon as possible. And no effort has been spared to do this. And again, we want to mobilize the capacities that are available nationally and internationally. We are in a position to identify certain means of increasing capacity in collaboration with our international partners, and we'll continue working with them. Further, we want to look at the medium and long term. We have a group of experts, an expert panel which will be making recommendations. Some of what they've been saying, some of these people are in the our public groups, our companies, for example, Triumph, and then there are other specialists, so they want to make sure that Canadians will be as well served as possible. On this committee, we met with people from McMaster University and from the Triumph group, and they thought there could be very quick solutions, quick alternatives, and they said you could have intervened far more quickly, and you said, well, we've made progress, but now you're saying the report won't be till November? Well, I'm really disappointed because then the government has to look at it, and that'll take time, and we'll be back here 2 years from now, and I'll be asking you the same questions. Well, it's clear that there is a problem, and the process will take a certain time. And you are impatient, and quite legitimately so. But whether we're talking about Triumph or the Maple reactors, whether we're talking about McMaster or other recommendations and positions on the table, proposals on the table, these would all require considerable expenditures on the part of the government and the mobilization of major resources. We have to make choices, and as I said, these will have an impact for the next 30, 40 years. So there are short-term imperatives that we have to deal with, and also we have to deal with the longer term. And we have to be dealing with all these things at the same time. But it will take us a certain amount of time to do things properly and professionally, and we'll do it as quickly as we can. Do I have any more time?
You had about 10 seconds, but I've managed to use that for you. So we'll go now to Mr. Julian, who is filling in for the New Democrats. Go ahead, please, Mr. Julian.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur Dupont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Dupont, for appearing today. You said earlier in your response to Madame Brunel that no effort had been spared to bring the reactor back into service. Can you tell the committee just what amount of money has been invested by the department to make sure that that they be brought into service as soon as possible? Well, what I can say about that is that the cost assessments will be done by AECL as this project goes forward. AECL is a Crown corporation. The government has been funding and continues to fund all this, and it will be meeting its responsibilities with respect to these operations within its overall financial funding of AECL. So, has AECL asked for a certain amount of money? Well, we don't know of any formal request for money, but there are very clear instructions that have been given to complete this task, but we have not yet received a formal request. And the Government of Canada is fulfilling its responsibilities to meet the financial needs of AECL and will continue to do so. So no requests yet. But if there is a request for money, will the department consider this and help them? Well, we will look at it in the context of our relationship with AECL, which is a Crown corporation.
This is not a small issue, as you can imagine. This is a crisis, particularly for those who are having to wait for diagnosis and wait for treatment every day when you have cancer is something that has profound implications for the health of the individual and the family as well. So I'm curious if Atomic Energy Canada has not yet provided any figures for the ministry to provide support so we can get the reactor up and running. I'm interested in knowing what the cost of servicing and maintenance were for the NRU in the past year, and then what resources were available for that reactor 5 years ago and 10 years ago. Do you have those figures available?
I would have and would be happy to provide the committee with a full chapter and verse on the funding that has been provided to Atomic Energy of Canada, including to Chalk River Laboratories in the past. Those amounts at the level of the Government of Canada were not disaggregated to the level of maintenance for the NRU. That would have been within the financial accounting of Atomic Energy of Canada.
Yeah, but those figures are available to you, right? So you know,
I'm sure they would be from Atomic Energy
as
of
part
Canada.
of the reporting structure.
Right.
Yeah.
I suspect they would be. But the reporting structure would be about running the Chalk River Laboratories, which is a broader operation than simply the NRU. There are all kinds of other facilities there. And the government would, on an annual basis, have provided an appropriation to Atomic Energy, has provided an appropriation to Atomic Energy of Canada to run Chalk River Laboratories, and in various cases has also received supplementary monies to provide for the update and the upkeep of the facilities.
But you have those figures available? Can you make them available?
We certainly can make available we as the Government of Canada, the numbers for Chalk River. The further disaggregation would have to come forward from ACL.
Okay. Let's move on to the cost of the healthcare system and to provincial governments. We've had estimates, $10 million from Quebec, much more than that from Ontario, from other provinces impacted as well. These are all additional costs that weigh on the healthcare system because of the cost of supplying isotopes. Now, is within the ministry, is there a department or section that is tracking those additional healthcare costs?
Mr. Chair, that would be a principal responsibility of the Department of Health Canada. I mean, the Health Canada has been conducting the interface here with the provincial ministries of health, with the health community. We at NRCan have been focused on the supply side of the equation. We obviously talk to Health Canada, and we have those kinds of discussions. And we appreciate the fragile situation globally is entailing higher costs, but you would need to address the question to Health Canada in terms of jurisdiction by jurisdiction or actual higher costs. It is also not a trivial matter of estimating that because, for example, even prior to the NRU shutdown, there were some price increases announced by some of the suppliers of technetium-99. So there were already some market developments prior to the shutdown of the NRU, and one would have to disaggregate what is truly the cause of the NRU shutdown versus what may be other market factors that are in play.
Mr. Dupont, are you saying then that any tracking that's taking place, the additional costs to the healthcare system of not having the production, online, that's taking place separately from the ministry, and the ministry is unaware of those costs.
No, I'm not saying we're unaware of those costs. We're aware of the costs generally. We're aware there are higher costs. The tracking, we've been working closely with Health Canada on this, and Health Canada is working with the provincial ministries.
But wouldn't they be making those figures available to the ministry? I mean, I don't understand this.
Well,
you've got Health Canada doing one thing and the Minister of Natural Resources doing another?
What our principal focus is to try to bring forth the best kind of supply situation to the market. Whether there's some, whether the additional costs are X or Y, to us the job is the same. Health Canada has the relationships with the provinces. It is within the provincial domain to assume the costs in the healthcare system. Health Canada has those relationships, and to the extent that there's been some communication on the costs with the provinces, then Health Canada may be better able to answer the question than I can on the basis of my assessment of the supply situation in the marketplace.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. We go now to Mr. Shorey for up to 7 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for coming out this afternoon. And I'll be sharing my time with Mr. Anderson, and I have one quick question. And before that, I'm of the view that if not all, most of us agree to two things. One is that Canada has been the world leader in isotope supplies, and the second is that shortage of isotopes is seriously concerned to all of us. Now, coming back to my question, that while our government explores the options, I have noticed one thing, that some concerns about governments examining the options of private sector participating in the commercial operation of AECL. My question is now, if the commercial operation of AECL is participated by private sector, regulated and monitored by CNSC as it is today, would it be a compromise with the safety, security, and well-being of Canadians in any manner whatsoever?
Is clearly, short and long answer is no. If one looks, for example, the situation in the power sector in Ontario right now, there is a private sector firm called Bruce Power that operates nuclear reactors in Ontario under the regulation of the CNSC. It does so with the same safety standards as OPG and as Hydro-Quebec and NB Power. So short answer and long answer is no.
Okay. To reconfirm quickly,
you have another question?
Reconfirm quickly that while these days the government is looking for a long-term solution, and we are exploring the viability of producing isotopes with new reactors. So it does not matter who runs that business.
I think that what, and I'll be brief in my remark because I may not have fully captured your answer, your question. I think that what was announced on May 28 by the Minister of Natural Resources with regard to restructuring the Atomic Energy of Canada is what will be the structure, what will be the ownership structure that will best utilize, mobilize the talent that is here in Canada, the expertise, so that we may play as we may play in the global marketplace. And a sense that the current structure is not the one that optimizes that outcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Jean, you have one question, I understand?
Just a very short series of questions about cost estimate taking over from Mr. Julian. Just from my notes, it seems to appear that there was a 40% reduction in annual appropriation for AECL during 1995 by the Liberal government. And are you familiar with those figures?
Yes, we have the full historical tracking of the...
So that's accurate. There was a 40% reduction by the Liberal government in 1995?
It was, there was a significant reduction in conjunction with program review in 1995. I'd have to go back to the figures.
In fact, isn't it true that from 1993 to 2006, under the Liberal government, there was approximately $161 million on average spent per year for that time period, and since then, since the 2006, and in fact, the Conservative government, that number has increased to $425 million per year, $1.7 billion over 4 years. Is that accurate?
I can't do the math quite that fast, but the numbers look to be in the ballpark, and I could certainly provide the committee with the full historicals if that could be helpful, Mr. Chair.
In fact, in 2009, 2010, $580 million was actually allocated just this year to AECL and Chalk River Laboratories.
Correct, if that is inclusive of the amounts being appropriated through Natural Resources Canada for the waste program.
So there has been a significant increase in the funding under this government.
For sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Jean, we go now to Mr. Anderson for, you have about 2.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually want to follow up on a question. I think Mr. Allen started it, and I think Mr. Tonks touched on it as well, and that's talk about the alternatives. Do you have any information on what percentage of treatments are now being done by alternative treatments? And more importantly, do you have any idea, and I think Mr. Allen asked this earlier, do you have any idea if we're going to... Carolyn, do you want to interrupt or not?
Yeah, if we could have order, please. Mr. Anderson, go ahead, hopefully uninterrupted.
Okay, and the other question is, do you think that we're going to be moving into a time when there's diversification, or once NRU's back up, some of the other reactors are running, are we going to go back to almost a total reliance on isotopes? Do you have any thoughts on that?
The better qualified individuals to answer those kinds of questions would be obviously in the medical community. What I can tell on the basis of the information provided to us by Health Canada, that what they basically estimate is that there is a significant portion of procedures that can be replaced by other substances such as thallium, fluoride, as we heard from Mr. McEwen, Dr. McEwen. That said, there is a portion that is, is estimated to be in a range of 50%, where there is not necessarily at this time an alternative available to technetium, and so that is why it is important to continue to have a minimum supply and a healthy supply of technetium. That is why it's important to continue the international efforts to bring it in the absence of the NRU.
I want to shift to a completely different subject, and one that I think should be important to this committee, and that is, despite some of the announcements being made recently about new builds being postponed, nuclear is still obviously a part of our energy mix, and Canadians want it to be that way. These new builds will require some sense of stability. I want you to talk a little bit, if you would, about what would Bill C-20, which has actually been sent to the committee, do in terms of providing that stability, because I think that's something that the committee should be moving forward on if they really want to deal seriously with the nuclear issue in Canada.
That is, Bill C-20 is about updating our nuclear liability regime in Canada. Currently, operators of nuclear facilities have a maximum liability in the event of a disruption, of an accident of any kind, to $75 million. That is outside of the realm of what is a global standard. The limit will be raised to $650 million, which is also roughly equivalent to the amount that may reasonably be purchased in the market, by way of insurance. So it provides the environment whereby we both hold entities to account and at the same time provide that we may build in Canada a viable and vibrant nuclear industry.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We now will go to a second round. If there's anyone who would like to ask questions, we could have about 3 minutes from each party. We have about 12 minutes left in this round, starting with the official opposition. Mr. Tonks.
Just, Chairman, I want to follow up on the answer that was given with respect to the committee, the panel committee, and the recommendations that would come forward, and the role that this contracted firm or individual is going to play in a critical situation. Does the department and is the ministry and is the minister prepared to accept that the ultimate decision will be made not from the panel, but from some individual or firm that has been contracted to give an opinion? Is that the position that the department is taking?
Not at all, sir. And I would suggest that if a firm that would be hired would purport to provide definitive recommendations in any kind of way, would have a very wrong understanding of its role. The role of the firm will be to support the panel in order to provide it the best possible cross-sectoral analysis of the information provided in the submissions, and to bring added professional capacity to the panel so that they may look at the 22 submissions in a concerted and analytically robust fashion, bringing forth their own very significant expertise. And I think you will find that the individuals who serve on the panel also are doing so with independence of mind and with their integrity and their credibility that is extremely strong, and they will be making the recommendations to the minister.
Okay.
A minute and a half left. Mr. Regan.
Thank you. Can you, Mr. Chairman, through you to the witness, can you confirm that there were no shutdowns at the reactor at Chalk River that caused a global isotope shortage prior to 2007?
I heard the answer that was provided to you by ACL. I'm not sure I could confirm that. It is my understanding, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure I could confirm it with, with a zero element of doubt. Certainly prepared to go back and look at the history. I don't know, Tom, whether you...
No, I think the answer given was the previous major shutdown was in the early 70s, and there was a backup reactor, the NRX, available at that time, so it didn't create the kind of global shortages that we've seen recently with the shutdown of the NRU, or actually with the shutdown of the Petton reactor last year. That notwithstanding the efforts of the NRU to ramp up production, there was still a significant impact on the global marketplace. But I think prior to 2007, which I think what you referred to, I'm not aware of any incidences of the kind that we've experienced in the last few years. There have been periodic shutdowns of other reactors in the world over the last 5 years, not just in Canada, that have led to a tight supply situation on occasion.
Thank you, Mr. Regan. We go now to Ms. Glant for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think we have to recognize that the government responsible for the 10 years prior to the shutdown bears some responsibility here too. It seems that your department is working towards a future where security of Canada's supply of medical isotopes is built on a more effective international coordination of isotope producing reactors. I'm going to ask you a series of questions and just time your answers accordingly. Is this the most desirable scenario as opposed to a standalone Canada-only system for security, for a secure supply? Does the department foresee Canada being a significant contributor to this international network of isotope-producing nations in the long term? And will Canada's contribution to a network of reactor sources be a reactor fully integrated with other countries? Because it seems that we're pausing to consider the merits of many other approaches while getting started on a replacement for the NRU reactor is delayed for another 1 or 2 years. Is this the period of discussion worth the risk? Is this period of discussion really worth the risk of any further delay in replacing the NRU?
Well, again, replacement of the NRU, if we're talking about building a new research reactor, rough numbers, $1 billion, and it is an investment for the next 50 to 60 years. So that would be deserving of some time to make sure that you get it right. Now, there are other supply alternatives when it comes to isotopes, but as regard a new research reactor, that is an important consideration. Is it necessarily better than a self-standing Canadian kind of solution? We think so. The reason being that whatever solution you will have, to have the world dependent on one supply chain when there cannot be inventory of any kind held for any reasonable period of time is not healthy. So there has to be more distributed supply. And it is also somewhat uncharacteristic For the U.S., for example, to be the largest consumer in the world, have no indigenous production capability, being reliant fully on its international partners, it is perfectly normal and I think salutary for the U.S. to look at its own production options. That should Canada be a significant contributor to the world market in the long term? We certainly have skills, we certainly have capacities, and we have a history. What we have not had to date is a reasonable business model. Frankly, this has not been an attractive business for Atomic Energy of Canada. It may have been for some of the other parties in the supply chain, and I think what we, as I mentioned earlier, the real public policy imperative number one is to ensure that the needs of the healthcare system are met, and if, as well, there could be commercial opportunities realized through the export of that capacity, in the export or production in Canada and export, that's great. But you know, the judgment is still out on that, and I think that's what we hope to be hearing as well from the panel.
Thank you, Ms. Gallant. And Madame Brunel, go ahead with questions for up to 3 minutes.
Oui, suite à la déclaration.
Following the Prime Minister's statement about isotopes, can you tell us what direction the government is going in? Will we continue to produce isotopes? Well, first of all, what the Prime Minister said was clear. It's not taking anything away from the efforts now underway to bring the reactor back into service. That's the first thing. Secondly, what I just explained is important. The model that has worked heretofore is no longer sustainable, not from the point of view of health and not from the point of view of Canadian taxpayers. We have to invest colossal amounts of money in order that Canada be able to continue to supply on its own the international isotope market, unless it becomes really attractive from a market point of view, a commercial point of view. Now, I think it's reasonable that we should be able to meet our own needs, but not the needs of the rest of the world. So the present model does not work. It has to be changed. But the government will meet its responsibilities, its present responsibilities. So in the meantime, we will at least be ensuring that Canadian needs are met. Okay. Now, with an extended shutdown, have you coordinated with other reactors in the world? We've seen that some of these reactors will be shutting down. So has the government brought in an action plan, a short-term, medium-term action plan? And perhaps they'll have something among these 22 proposals that are on the table, or 22 expressions of interest. Well, there have been other consultations internationally, and we have to look at the schedules for production in 2010. We're in contact with our international partners. The minister is, I am, and our colleagues in AECL are in close communication with the Belgians, the French, the Dutch. And in September, there is going to be a meeting in Belgium where we'll look at 2010 and look at the risks and look at when the best possible periods would be. We don't have ideal scenarios, but I think that each of the partners has a role to play in order to capitalize on their capacity. Well, you've talked about costs, and I'm sure that your analysis was done meticulously, but you didn't seem to rely on Canadian experts, because I thought this was an industry. We have an industry where we have a business, MDS Nordion, and it seems that when we want expert opinions, and when things become a little more expensive and difficult, we abandon their opinions. But I think that we are proud of being leaders in certain areas, and we should continue to be. Well, what you say with respect to Canada's nuclear capacity, well, our minister in May talked about restructuring AECL so that we can better mobilize our resources. And here in Canada, this is a growing field.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. In your remarks, Mr. Dupont, where you talk about your medium-term actions and you're engaged in the discussions with the United States government, Oak Ridge and McMaster, with a view to replacing part of NRU's supply beginning as early as September 2010. In some of the testimony we heard previously from McMaster, with the safety cases and with the analysis that would have to be done, it sounded to me like the timeline, if they were selected, would be a little bit longer than that. What do you see as the most logical types of solutions that could be implemented for part of NRU's capacity as early as September 2010? And do you look at medium term as being that realistically what you can do within the next 2 to 3 years? Because obviously, as you said, we have to change the whole strategy, and that probably involves a lot longer time frame.
The medium term, you're correct. I mean, let's say 18 months to 3 years, roughly, essentially operating with the same kind of paradigm as we are now. Any short-term solution in a North American context, and we met with U.S. Department of Energy, with their nuclear regulator, with the CNSC, with the chief laboratories in the U.S. and Canada, is essentially irradiating the same kind of material that goes into the NRU in another reactor, and then shipping the irradiated material to Chalk River for processing, essentially under the same process as done with the NRU. That is a complex kind of task. We're talking about transportation of irradiated material, highly radioactive, across borders in some cases, and looking at the capacities of different reactors to accommodate these targets given their physical characteristics. So we've pursued work with Oak Ridge Laboratory that seems to have a reactor that could accommodate that for portions of time, the Missouri University reactor, and McMaster. McMaster takes a bit more time than the others to get on stream. So we are pursuing that, and again, with the U.S. administration equally committed to try to find solutions. But again, best case, we're into September kind of world, 2010, to replace part of the production of the NRU.
Okay. Just a quick one.
Mr. Allen, you have 30 seconds. Yeah.
Okay. With Petton back online and Australia looking to come at the end of the year, what does that look like if that all happens in terms of replacing what we have now, the situation we have now?
We do not expect that absent the NRU, one gets back to 100% supply as, when the NRU is up. The situation has fluctuated, for example, in the month of June and July, where as Canada would be getting, in a range of 70% of normal supplies, or 70, sometimes higher, sometimes 80, sometimes close to 100%, sometimes lower, sometimes closer to 50%. The situation will continue to evolve. We are not in a position to provide definitive kind of forecasts over an extended period of time. I'll come back to the shorter time kind of forecasts, because a lot depends on what flows back to Canada as supply from the other reactors in South Africa and in Europe. On a shorter time frame, Health Canada deals with the two suppliers of technetium generators in the U.S., Lantheus and Covidian, and there, with some weeks' notice, we get a fairly accurate picture of what kind of supply to expect. So I can't really give you a good picture, but we should be in a position where you're not at 100%, you're higher than 50%. It's going to fluctuate over that period of time, depending on a range of considerations, including commercial relations.
Mr. Allen, and point of order.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to seek unanimous consent for the committee to meet again no later than next Friday to hear from Dr. Urbain, Dr. Dridger, Dr. O'Brien, and Dr. Lamoureux on the topic before us today and on the impacts that they are seeing to frontline doctors across the country.
You've heard the proposal. Mr. Anderson, you want to?
Well, that's not a point of order, Mr.
Just
Chair, but
on a point of
first of all, I'd like to make the point that the opposition couldn't even get their witness list organized before they called this meeting. That's one of the things that's ticked me off about this whole thing, and particularly their attitude today. And I'm glad Mr. Reagan's brought this up, because I don't think they've treated this meeting seriously at all. And evidence of that would be the fact that they released their news release earlier today before the meeting was even half over. On Monday morning, we heard from the opposition that they wanted to have a meeting. We were required to have it within 3 days, or within 5 days. That basically gave us 3 days to set it up, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so we could have it today. We did that. The clerk worked very hard, worked overtime to try to put this together. We set up a 3.5-hour meeting today. It's hardly a short meeting, as Ms. Bennett called it, a short meeting. We've been here. There's concern over witnesses, apparently. We have used the opposition witness list. That's what we used to set this up. We brought as many new witnesses into the hearing as we possibly could, and it was set up that way. There was apparently some concern over 5 witnesses, and it gets awfully ridiculous, Mr. Chair, because 3 of those 5 witnesses have already appeared at either this committee or at Health Committee. One person, they don't even know this themselves because it's in their news release, one person declined. So this is their witness who declined. They don't even have that much knowledge of what went on this week to be able to know that. And I think that is actually probably a pretty good sign of why this meeting was held. It wasn't to find out about isotopes. It was to set up some sort of a political charade, which we've seen this afternoon. Mr. Chair, we're having a health minister here, even though this is the Natural Resources Committee. I think we've gone the extra mile for these folks. Clearly, the opposition's been poorly organized right from the beginning, and that's evident by the fact that the witnesses were not even called prior to them deciding that they had a witness list and submitting it to us. Most of those witnesses were not available, or a good number of them were not available. And so, you know, between that and the Liberals having released their news release earlier today, I think it shows what they really intended to do with this today, and that is, as Mr. Cullen said earlier, make it into a spectacle, and they've been able to do that. We probably are not going to get a lot of this testimony out into the public view, because these folks are more intent on trying to make this into, as Mr. Cullen called it, a spectacle rather than dealing seriously with this issue. So we don't need to meet again, and we don't need to meet again in the near future, and so we're going to happily decline Mr. Reagan's offer.
There may be some further discussion on this, but I would like to just thank the witnesses very much, Mr. DuPont and Mr. Wallace, for coming this afternoon. You may leave the table if you would like, so you don't have to take part in this discussion. Mr. Regan has asked for unanimous consent. I'd just like to also say that there seems to be some misunderstanding about who was and who wasn't invited to this meeting. As clerk, as chair, I've been in discussion with the clerk, and he's pointed out to me there was a press release put out by the Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine this afternoon. One of the people who signed off on that was Mr. O'Brien, complaining that he wasn't allowed to come to this committee. In fact, he was invited and he declined. So I don't know what's you know, it's just, I guess, some very strange things happening in terms of you know, what's being said and what actually happened. But Mr. Regan, you have a right to come and ask for unanimous consent. I will ask, is there unanimous consent for the proposal Mr. Regan has put forth? No, there is not, Mr. Regan. So we will now suspend this meeting. We have one more witness this afternoon, and that is the Health Minister from the province of Ontario. He has chosen to appear not in person, not by video conference, but by telephone only. So we will be getting to him. We'll allow a little time for setup, about 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll get on to our last witness. I'll suspend this meeting now for 2 to 3 minutes. Okay. Good afternoon again, everyone. We have our last witness now by telephone, and it's the Honourable David Kaplan, the Ontario Minister of Health. Welcome, Mr. Kaplan. Are you on the phone?
Mr. Chair, yes, I am here. Thank you for inviting me to be here in front of the committee.
Thank you. Do you have an opening statement to make, Mr. Kaplan?
Yes, I do, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I want to start by thanking you for inviting me to appear before the committee. I'm glad to be able to bring Ontario's voice to the table, and I'm here because I am concerned. Our province has relied upon the National Research Universal Reactor at Chalk River for 95% of our supply of medical isotopes. But over the past few years, we have become increasingly anxious about the sustainability of this supply. I believe, as you all know, it can be disrupted suddenly and with little warning. And because of the just-in-time way that isotopes are produced and delivered, healthcare providers feel the effects of critical disruption almost immediately, and of course, the effect on healthcare patients. As you can imagine, the shutdown of the Chalk River nuclear reactor on May the 15th has had significant implications for Ontario patients and Ontario healthcare providers. Since the week of July 26th, supply has been cut in half and now even as low as 40%. As a province, we have been challenged. Now, that said, I want to assure the members of this committee that Ontario is doing everything it can to respond to this disruption. We are taking action to ensure that we can continue providing patients with the high-quality scans that they depend upon. For example, in June of this year, we provided $1.4 million to fund the production of an alternative isotope called sodium fluoride 18F. Using PET technology, this alternative allows Ontario to provide 2,000 patients with needed bone scans. It's an innovative solution that is ensuring that Ontarians have access to important diagnostic procedures during this challenging time. We are also providing guidance to the nuclear medicine community to make sure health providers are maximizing available isotopes. By modifying scanning techniques, prioritizing patients, and using alternative diagnostic tools, I am very proud to say that we've been able to minimize the effects of the disruption. We have done that by being responsive and proactive, and by anticipating the challenges to come. Ontario has one of the most comprehensive medical isotope disruption plans of any of Canada's provinces. It is a plan developed based upon the advice of Ontario's Isotope Working Group. The working group is made up of key stakeholders and physician leaders, including the Ontario Association of Nuclear Medicine, Cancer Care Ontario, and the Cardiac Care Network. Our plan establishes 3 levels of response, with Tier 1 representing a minor reduction in supply and Tier 3 representing a critical disruption. Ontario is currently operating at a Tier 2 response level. There has been a significant reduction in isotope supply, but our providers have been able to continue managing the disruption locally, and we have been offering guidance to our healthcare professionals. Tier 2 triggers the partial activation of the Ministry's Emergency Operations Center. The Operations Center monitors isotope supply with the federal government and ensures that all of our healthcare providers have the tools and information they need to be able to respond. Now, I want to stress the importance of coordination and collaboration with our federal government colleagues, because Ontario, like all provinces, is relying upon advice, guidance, and information from the federal government as we develop our own response plans. And I want to assure this committee that we are in regular communication with Health Canada officials, because we depend upon them to keep us up to date on the status of the NRU and to share best practices and contingency planning. These, however, are short-term measures. My presence here today is because I'd like to see clarification about the federal government's plans. By sharing Ontario's story, I hope to foster a federal understanding of the difficult situation I'm sure many provinces now face. Ontario is operating under the assumption that the Chalk River nuclear reactor will be repaired and that it will continue to produce medical isotopes until a suitable and affordable alternative can be arranged. It's disappointing that Chalk River will remain closed, we're told now, until the spring of 2010. I would like the government's assurance that it is committed to repairing the NRU. And to help us plan, I would like to ask for regular updates from the government on the progress of the repair and clarification about when we might again expect the nuclear reactor to resume producing isotopes. Also, given that we are now reliant on international isotope suppliers, I would like to ask for regular updates on outages at other international reactors. Finally, our frontline healthcare partners have informed us of higher than normal costs for medical isotopes. Clearly, the federal government should compensate Ontario health providers for these additional costs they are currently facing as a result of the shortage. Now, I want to finish my formal remarks by emphasizing my willingness to work with healthcare partners in all levels of government to ensure that we can find solutions to this problem. Chalk River is a valuable national resource, providing a critical diagnostic tool to all Canadians who need it. It is important that the federal government shows leadership and develops a comprehensive, clear, and coordinated plan. Our healthcare providers, indeed all Canadians, deserve and depend on access to stable and affordable supply of radioisotopes. Mr. Chair, I do want to reiterate again my thanks to this committee for offering me this opportunity to be able to present, and I do eagerly await any questions or comments that committee members might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I would, before we get started with questions, just remind everyone that this is the Natural Resources Committee and not the Health Committee. And if the questions stray into an area that is more reasonably to be dealt with by the Health Committee, I will suggest that you invite these witnesses to the Health Committee. So, and this particular witness to the Health Committee, if you'd like to do that. But let's stick to the issue at hand. Let's stick to the instructions in the letters written by opposition members, and let's start with questioning. For the first questioner, 7 minutes, Ms. Bennett. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. And I'm afraid, Mr. Chair, that the patients of Canada don't see the way that the government can operate in these sorts of silos as you've described. So I believe that we have a health minister before us, and that we should, I believe, the will of the committee members, should be able to ask questions that are about the well-being of Canadians and in terms of how they will get the tests they need with the isotopes crisis as it is. So I will start with a question. It has a dollar sign in front of it instead of a stethoscope, if that's what you prefer. The Minister, last week the Toronto Star reported that the isotope costs were increasing from $5,000 to $30,000 and just are beginning to appear on the clinic's monthly isotope invoices. I guess I would ask you, how are the Ontario hospitals and clinics handling this increased cost of medical isotopes?
Thank you very much for the question. Our estimate so far is that direct cost to additional cost to hospitals and clinics is in the order of $1.7 million. Additionally, we have invested in an alternative form of supply, approximately $1.4 million toward the sodium fluoride isotope. The estimate that we have is that if things continue under the current regime, and that anticipates that there will not be a reduction in international supply, that by the time Chalk River comes back, we could well see a quadrupling of those costs between now and then.
Minister, are these the costs that you're asking the federal government to reimburse you for?
I have written to Federal Minister Aglukak and to Minister Raitt. It is my contention that this problem has been created by the federal government, that the federal government should fix it. Absolutely, there should be compensation. And I want to stress, compensation is not for the province. It is for hospitals and diagnostic facilities that are unfairly strapped. And ultimately, it would be patients who would suffer because of procedures which would not be funded as a result of funding shortfalls.
Minister, it seems that there's also been some reporting that hospitals might cut back on procedures in order to not run a deficit. Is that a concern of yours?
That is a concern of mine. We are, in fact, tracking. It is very hard to quantify, but we are seeing weeks of delay as far as having diagnostic procedures done. That means weeks of delay in physicians ordering the appropriate treatment for cancer patients, for some cardiac patients. That is the effect upon the patients who require, and their families, of course, is my greatest concern.
In the sodium fluoride that you suggested, that can only be used with a PET scanner, Minister. Are you aware of any leadership from the federal government in helping roll out a PET strategy, as the Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine has asked?
I am not aware of that. I will say that quite recently I have added PET scans as an OHIP insured service. In fact, we have one of the largest PET infrastructures in Canada, 10 PET scanners at 9 centers. One additional PET scanner is expected to be operational this fall in Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Centre and will be part of Ontario's PET program.
We have heard that for even PET scanning, that even though the isotope is way more expensive, that centers can only do about 10 procedures a day rather than the 40 bone scans that could be done with the gamma camera. Are you aware of increased wait times or cancellations or rebooking?
We have not tracked additional wait times for PET scanners at this point, and you are quite correct. It is only for bone scans. It is something that we are concerned about and monitoring, but to date we have not seen increase in wait times or any backup as we have in other areas.
Minister, you said you've stood up your operations center in order to track and map the availability. Are you aware if the federal government has stood up its operations center?
I have not had any confirmation that Federal Operations Center is operational.
I know Quebec has offered to help on PET scanning, particularly here in Ottawa. There's a PET scanner at Gatineau. They've offered, if asked, to help New Brunswick. Are you aware of any leadership that has been exhibited by Sandy McEwen or the federal government in helping provinces help one another?
Well, I would say quite fairly that Ontario officials have been in and working with federal officials to be able to monitor, understand the situation. I cannot speak about the efforts with other provinces, but I would characterize the working relationship between the federal government and the provincial government as a good and constructive one.
Thank you. In terms of your request for updates, yes. Are you saying that up until now you've not really been given updates in terms of the status of the Chalk River reactor or of the international alternatives?
I think one of the challenges is while we do receive updates, largely they have become known as we hear about them through the media, or they are quite late in their reply. In order for us to do our planning and develop any mitigation strategies, we need real-time and quick information. I would say the greatest disappointment that I've had is when Chalk River was originally, we were advised that it was going down. The original time frame was for a very short turnaround for its continued operation. That, of course, has come and gone, and we were told that it would be the summer. That has come and gone, and now we are told that it will be the spring. I would say, Ms. Bennett, that we need some firm assurance of when that's going to happen, and also what the outlooks are going to be, so that we can adequately have either mitigation steps or take the steps necessary to provide the scans for Ontario patients.
Minister Gluckart has said
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Your time is up. We go now to the Bloc Québécois, to Mr. Mello for up to 7 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Minister, for being with us this afternoon. A little earlier, you said that you had written to the Federal Minister of Natural Resources and the Minister of Health about possible compensation. Can you tell us when you wrote, and if you got an answer, and if so, what answer did you get?
In fact, write to the federal ministers. I'm looking right now. I wrote to Minister Raitt on May the 25th related to Chalk River going down. I wrote again to Minister Raitt on June the 9th, and I wrote to Minister Aglutek on June the 19th. I did receive the note on June the 19th specifically outlined the increase in prices, 40% that was anticipated at that point, as well as an additional 30% cost on the members of the Ontario Nuclear Medicine Association. I did receive a reply from Minister Aglukkaq on it was July the 28th. I received it on August the 4th. I will quote from the letter. I appreciate that you have concerns with respect to the rising cost of medical isotopes and the operating cost pressures associated with the shortage situation. The extent to which these price increases are due directly to the shutdown of the NRU is unclear. In fact, both Canada's primary distributors of TC99M generators notified customers of pending price increases prior to the NRU shutdown in May. So the minister goes on to say that further study and analysis is required in order to understand the underlying causes and scale of price increases for TC99M generators across Canada. So I must admit I failed to see how there is a lack of understanding of the supply-demand dynamic. I think it is a fairly well understood economic theory which has stood the test of time for hundreds of years.
Mais en aucun cas, Monsieur le Ministre.
But, Mr. Minister, were you in any way reassured as to possible compensation? Did you, in the answers you got from the ministers, were you led to understand that the government would accept its share of responsibility in this crisis and in the increase of costs related to short-term solutions?
There have been no assurances that the federal government will, in fact, assume its share of cost. In fact, I was rather disheartened. Read 1 week ago in a Globe and Mail article that Ottawa's response contained no indication such compensation would be forthcoming. In fact, there was a statement from Health Canada that said, and I quote, that further study and analysis is required in order to understand the underlying cause and scale of price increases. I would urge the federal government to recognize that this is a problem that was caused by the federal government, and they bear the responsibility for mitigating its fiscal impacts.
Monsieur le Ministre,
Mr. Minister, we know that this crisis has been creating additional pressure on staff in the hospital system. Can you tell us what, Mr. Malo?
Patient here. I did caution and ask you to keep your questions within the parameters set out in the letter we received from the members of the opposition. That gave the direction for this committee. You're straying outside of that. Ms. Bennett was straying outside of that to some extent, but I allowed her and you to go. But please get back to questions that are better asked of the Natural Resources Committee rather than the Health Committee.
Monsieur le Président, nous parlons à un ministre de la Santé. Je pense que
Mr. Chairman, we're talking to a health minister. I think it's logical to talk to him about health. We're supposed to talk to him about anything but health, especially given the crisis we're in. This is a health minister. It seems to me that it's quite relevant in the context of what we're looking at. We're talking to him as Minister of Health. Otherwise, I think that we're not doing what we should.
Mr. Regan.
Point of order. Mr. Chairman, I ask for unanimous consent to allow Mr. Mello to ask whatever question he wants during his time.
Go ahead.
I'm
Mr.
sorry, I'm
Mello.
asking for unanimous consent. I'm serious.
You can't do that on a point of order, Mr. Regan. You know
Why
that.
can you
Go
not
ahead,
ask for
Mr.
unanimous
Mello,
consent on a
please.
point of order? Sure you can.
No, you can't. Go ahead, Mr. Mello.
Bon. Monsieur le Ministre,
Minister, can you tell me what you'd like to talk to us about, since it's not possible for me here in this committee to talk to you about your expertise as Minister of Health? because I would have liked to talk to you about the problems in hospitals, what they're missing, the consequences on activities in hospitals. I would have liked you to talk about staff in hospitals, because we know that this crisis, we know that NRU won't be in service again until the spring of 2010, so the crisis will last longer than we had foreseen. I would have asked you how you thought you would have been able to deal with things with the staff in place, and given the fears of patients, how would you have thought you could respond to the needs of these people?
Time is a critical aspect of this. Imagine you're a cancer patient or a family, and you're finding that you are having weeks of delay and simply having the diagnostic performed to be able to inform what the medical treatment would be. And of course, that backs up and means that the medical treatment itself is delayed. The effect upon healthcare providers is quite significant as well. Hospitals and diagnostic clinics are finding that they are having to have their staff work significant additional hours and have overtime. It is all connected to timing of the reactors reactivating and also putting in place the plans and contingencies and mitigation strategies to enable Ontario's, and I would imagine all Canadian provinces, healthcare patients and healthcare providers to be able to deal with this crisis. As I mentioned earlier, one of the greatest disappointments has been that we have been advised the timeline for reactivation was to be the spring of this year. Later it was summer of this year. Now it is to be a further 8 months from now. We require some certainty in order to be able to provide the medical diagnostic and the medical procedures that Ontario cancer cardiac patients do require. This is creating a tremendous on patients and their families, and I don't think that the federal government should operate independent of these considerations.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mello. I'm going to go to Mr. Julian, but I do want to read the letter that was sent by 5 members, actually, of the opposition to the committee clerk, which is what resulted in, or this meeting is a result of that, because I want to point out what the opposition asked, what you asked, for the committee to discuss. And we are, the last 2 questioners have been speaking, the last 2 questioners have been questioning outside of the line of questioning that was directed by the opposition members themselves. So let's try to stick to the issue that we are here to discuss. Let's not get on to issues that are better dealt with by the Health Committee. Certainly, if you want to take it to the Health Committee, or if anyone does, you're welcome to do that. But I'm just going to read the short letter again to remind members what this committee is here to deal with. And this is what was asked for by the opposition, I would like to say. We, the undersigned members of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources, request that a meeting of our Standing Committee be convened pursuant to Standing Order 1064 in order to study, the prolonged closure of Atomic Energy of Canada Limited's NRU Chalk River reactor, which has resulted in the decrease of supply of medical isotopes and a worsening healthcare crisis, as well as the future of isotope production in Canada. And I would ask that the members stick to the direction given by the 5 members of the opposition, and also stick to the mandate of the Natural Resources Committee. Again, the Health Committee, I understand, is going to deal with this issue again. That's great. They've dealt with it in the recent past. Please, order. Ms. Bennett, order, please. Don't talk over I'd ask you not to speak over the chair when I'm making a statement that I believe is important for this committee to hear. Now we will go to Mr. Julian's questions. Up to 5 minutes, please, Mr. Julian. On topic, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciated your filibuster. I'm sure everyone else did as well. I thank the Health Minister for being here, at least in spirit, certainly by telephone, to deal with the worsening healthcare crisis that was part of the committee's mandate. I'd like to ask you, Minister Kaplan, you referenced 2 letters that went to the Minister of Natural Resources, one dated May 25th, the other dated June 9th. Did you receive a reply to either of those letters?
Mr. Julian, thank you very much. I did receive a letter from Minister Raitt. I received it on August the 19th, where Minister Raitt outlined that she felt that the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care should be commended for the efforts that we've had in coordinating and dealing with the current crisis, and then went on to outline some work that she had commissioned to have AUCL work on bringing the NRU back safely into operation as soon as possible.
Thank you, Minister. So in the midst of a huge medical crisis, it took 3 months for the Minister to reply to a letter from you?
Mr. Julian, I wrote letters on May 25th and June 9th to Minister Raitt and received a reply on August the 19th.
Yeah, okay. No, I just for the record stand, it took 3 months just to get a letter back. I think in the midst of a crisis, one would suggest that that is, to say the least, an undue delay. You referenced as well the cost the Ontario healthcare system, $1.7 million to hospitals, $1.4 million to the ministry itself. You stated that costs would quadruple, you believed. So are what you're suggesting essentially, and this would be projections through to next spring, but the cost of the healthcare system in Ontario would be about $12.5 million, or would it be beyond that?
Well, it is hard. It is speculative, and it is hard to estimate. For example, we know that the Dutch reactor has gone down for maintenance. We know that at one point the South African reactor did go down as well. If there is a disruption in the overall international supply, I think you would expect that even greater impact for the supply of medical isotopes, in the supply-demand dynamic and the costing of medical isotopes, as well as this goes on for an extended period of time, the extent of overtime, burnout, and the effect upon medical staff. It is hard to predict and hard to project, but I'm just using the best estimate that I've received from experts both within the ministry and within our advisories of a potential quadrupling if the current state were maintained.
But it could go beyond that.
It could potentially, and we will continue to monitor that and provide our very best estimates, and we won't know or be able to understand it until it was realized, and that obviously will be quite a bit into the future.
Okay, and Quebec has indicated the costs so far are over $10 million, so we're certainly talking about tens of millions of dollars in additional costs to the healthcare system. Now, what we've been struggling with around this committee is there seems to be a lot of response from the government. Well, it certainly took 3 months to get a letter out, but generally the government says it's concerned. But when we actually press the government on what it has done, I think the total to date is something in the order of $6 million budgeted, not even spent at this point, to actually address this crisis. That's a lot of smoke and mirrors, but you have to wonder where's the beef. So I'd like to ask you, do you believe $6 million, if that indeed has been spent, is adequate given the size and scope of this crisis right across the country? The personal suffering, certainly, but when we look at the cost of the healthcare system across the country as well, do you think that's adequate, and do you think it's fair that it would take 3 months for a minister just to reply to a letter from the health minister in charge of the largest province in the country?
Well, Mr. Julian, I know that, and was reiterated to me in the letter, in the reply, Minister Raitt, was that on June the 16th, Minister Aglukak announced that the federal government would provide $6 million, but I believe that was for research funding to assess alternative medical and diagnostic procedures, which potentially could alleviate. I don't believe that it was for any direct funding or any direct compensation or help to provinces or indeed to patients. I think that, and I did characterize that there is a working relationship between staff at the ministry and staff at Health Canada, which is a constructive one, and I do want to assure members of the committee that we are doing our best to work together. I'm looking for leadership at the federal level to recognize the challenge and also to redress and to mitigate the effect that it will have on cancer and cardiac patients, on their families, on the healthcare providers in the province of Ontario, indeed across Canada. As far as the delay or the time in replying to my correspondence, I think those questions would be better addressed to Ministers Raitt and Ministers Aglukak, and perhaps they will provide you with some understanding of what their time imperatives are.
Mr. Kaplan, now there has been some discussion around funding for alternative facilities such as the McMaster Research Facility. Has the Ontario government taken a position on that? And if it has, is this a request that would be made of the federal government to provide funding to increase the isotope production from that facility?
In fact, I believe at the end of May 29th, is my understanding, the jointly federal and provincial governments announced that they would provide some $22 million for upgrades to the research reactor at McMaster University in Hamilton. My understanding is that that's the only reactor in Canada other than NRU capable of producing the technetium isotopes. My understanding as well is that it's estimated that it will take approximately a year and a half from the time of submission of the proposal until production would even be possible. I'm not aware of any further discussions that have taken place.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Now, finally, I'd just like to ask you about the credibility of the government. We've seen 3 revised dates now for a reopening of the NRU. And we discussed earlier the length of time it took even to get a reply to your correspondence. Do you believe the government is actually taking this crisis seriously?
I can tell you that I'm disappointed that reactor dates for the restart dates have not been met, and quite concerned that the reactor won't open until the spring of 2010. I'm relying upon the federal government to provide a long-term sustainable supply of medical isotopes. I think it might be appropriate to pose those questions directly to the federal ministers, but I would say that patients demand and their families demand that we work together to create certainty on a plan. And I know that that's what I am committed to, and I know that's what I am willing to do, working in partnership with our federal colleagues.
Julian, and we go now to Ms. Gallant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will be sharing my time with Brian Jean. Minister, Saskatchewan has stepped up to the plate and submitted a cost-sharing proposal to the expert panel on isotope supply. Did Ontario submit a proposal to offer a collaborative approach to securing a long-term isotope supply?
In fact, in my letter to Minister Raitt, I did indicate that Ontario would be willing to work in partnership with the federal government to look at securing a sustainable supply. We have not, of our own nature, produced a plan to do so. But I look forward to engaging Minister Raitt and/or Minister Aglukak or members of the government in that regard.
Okay. Now, the whole discussion and the fear over the isotope shortage has raised fears with respect to treatment of cancer after it's been diagnosed. Many calls that I'm receiving in my constituency office are from worried patients who are waiting 3, 6 months and longer to have a radiation treatment, and they think that's a consequence of the isotope shortage, even though they have already been diagnosed. Now, I understand that 25% of the patients who are already diagnosed are not receiving the radiation treatment within the targeted timelines. What is being done to ensure that the patients who have been diagnosed, who are fortunate enough to have a family doctor to order the tests, are actually getting the treatment that they need?
Very good question. In fact, one of the areas that we have taken incredible leadership, and I think was the Institute for Canadian Health Research verified that Ontario leads Canada as far as being able to drive down wait times for certain cancer among them. In fact, that's why we're building additional radiation bunkers in your end of the province, in Ottawa, but also in Sault Ste. Marie, in Kingston, in southwestern Ontario as well. So we are expanding capacity to provide radiation and provide it on a more timely basis. What we have been seeing, in fact, has been a steady reduction in the wait times that patients have to wait. The fact of the matter is, in this case, that when there is a delay and disruption in the time for diagnosis of cancers, that obviously means that there will be a delay in the treatment of those cancers. And this is, I think, of concern to this committee, is what leadership is being provided by the federal government in order to mitigate and to address that delay that patients and their families are inevitably seeing.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you then very much, Mr. Minister. We appreciate your time here. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much.